The Everything Sequel Podcast is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and the Everything Sequel Podcast. The Everything Sequel Podcast contains explicit language. 'Cause we learned it from you, Dad. Star Wars. We're talking Rogue One. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the man who wants to imprison me, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hello, Tom.
I find that answer vague and unconvincing.
Why'd you have to start with that? It's the one argument you'll have over me for this movie all day long.
Which is what?
The CGI.
Oh no, that's K2SO.
It's not Tarkin?
No, definitely not Tarkin.
Oh well, thank God.
Yeah, no, I'm not. You thought I was going for the jugular right away?
Yeah, right away.
No, not at all. No. Well, I was gonna say that. Spoiler alert: the quotable at the end of the episode is going to be K2SO as well.
Okay.
If we were to do multiple episodes on Rogue One, all the quotables would be K2SO.
Excellent.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember the line now. I don't know why you sounded so much like you sounded so much like him, like Peter Cushing.
Yeah, well, I thought I was doing a good K2SO.
I think it was your natural accent mixed with the robot voice ended up sounding like Peter Cushing.
K2SO is like a mix of Hal from 2001 and Marvin the Paranoid Android from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's what I try to do when I do K2SO.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no problems with K2SO in this movie.
Well, I'll just headline it now. Best new character in the franchise since the original trilogy.
Absolutely. We're in agreement. Yay!
But it goes back to what we were saying about the Disney era, is that they do droids well. And only droids.
Well, I might have something to say about that for this
movie.
Not
necessarily in this movie. I think this movie is the exception that proves the rule, but
okay.
Although saying that, can you imagine setting a standard like K2SO and then following it up with D-O? Couple of paper cups with a shitty Nepo baby voice. It's one or the other, really, unless you're deliberately trying to insult us as an audience.
Your hatred of J.J. Abrams has no bounds.
But it doesn't seem like he's trying. We've come up with a surrogate C-3PO who is sort of every bit as good.
Yeah, I agree.
in a very different way, and that's why he's as good, is because he's a different
right.
flavor of sassy British droid. Mm-hmm. More on the passive aggressive autistic side. And so
I mean, by far some of the best jokes in all of these Disney era Star Wars. I mean, it's
in
this
all the Star
droid
Wars,
by far, yeah. In all the Star Wars too. You're probably right.
You know, I how many people know that that's Alan Tudyk doing that as well? You know, we all know Anthony
I think
Daniels.
most people do, but yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's kind of it's forgotten about too readily. Even by me going back to it, I was like, oh yeah, K2SO.
Yeah.
Why is he not in more
shit
Star Wars spin-off? You could have thrown him into Obi-Wan. You could have thrown him into maybe Obi-Wan's a bit early. I mean, he's going to be in the second season of Andor. I think that's already been announced.
Okay.
We're going to see him deprogrammed for the first time, I think. Which I'm looking forward to.
Always got to go back and show the mind wipe.
That was my other revelation about going back to Rogue One. It's the first time I've watched it since watching Andor.
Yeah, me too, actually, yeah.
And I spent most of the time debating whenever Cassian Andor was on screen. So how much did they plan Andor, and how much did they just kind of seize on these couple of moments where they vaguely go into his backstory and thought,
Yeah.
let's build out from there, because he mentions I mean, you mentioned it in your introduction, but he mentions prison as well,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was, what order did it happen? Did they hear this and go, oh, maybe he was literally in prison?
Right.
Because the line is something along the lines of, people create their own prisons, which suggests that he was in some kind of a metaphorical prison, but not actually in prison.
Right.
But Andor interpreted it as, like, no, he was just in prison. Building the very Death Star that he didn't know about until this movie.
Correct. Well, and I've got more to say on that character specifically. Some turns in this movie that kind of surprised me, but I'll hold on to it for now.
Yeah, well, we got some business to take care of first.
We do. This is, in fact, our 300th episode. What a milestone.
Amazing milestone. And right before the podcast, I was looking through Apple Podcast at what we've done in the last 100 episodes, and I was amazed to see we've covered the entirety of the Friday the 13th series.
Mm-hmm.
Both the prequels of Star Wars and the sequels. And yeah, so
all
I
of
mean,
Halloween.
We finished lots of series, but we even in those 100 episodes we did complete series as well, sort of going back to them,
Mm-hmm.
doing them in two halves.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Kind of a amazing amount we've achieved in that 100 episodes.
Good for us.
Yeah, and we've gone back and completed series that we've started, like the 1990 single sequels.
Mm-hmm.
Begun the
Did we start the Halloween series in the previous 100 and finish it in this 100? Is
Yes.
that right? Or yeah.
Oh no! I think we cleared it. No, I think we cleared it before.
Oh, okay.
Quite possibly. We began with RoboCop. I think our 200th and 201 episode was RoboCop. So yeah, there's a lot. We've covered a lot in not a short period of time, because this 100 episodes has taken longer than our first 200 because of
the prodigious pace we set to begin with.
I know. I was thinking
transferred
about that.
over to our paywall.
since we went down to once a week release.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've gone a little slower, but thinking back to it, we were releasing 2 episodes a week, and I think at times, for reasons that escape me, 3 episodes a week. I seem to remember there was.
It's probably possible.
For certain series, we tried to kind of we had to get through them quickly. So,
what were we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely crazy. So I'm glad we went back to, something that was more manageable. But 1 episode a week, I think, is still quite an output.
Yeah.
To sustain that, and I don't think we've missed a week. In the last 100 episodes.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
So you're welcome.
Come close a couple times. It's like, no, we can.
We can.
We can find a way.
People are we assume depending on us, and even if they're not,
yeah,
we're professionals, and
that's how we treat it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we at least
might not be how we're treated, but it's how we treat it.
Yes, exactly. It's how we'd like to be treated. So we set that up. We set that standard up. Oh yeah, we've also done the other big part of it is we've done all the sequels that were directed by Steven Spielberg in the last 100 episodes.
Is that right? Oh, nice.
Jurassic Park
There's
and
not a lot.
Indiana Jones. There's not a lot, but we've covered the canon.
Yeah.
In the space of 100 episodes, so that struck me as well. That we've started and completed some Herculean tasks in that time.
That deserves a Busta Rhymes pat on the back.
It does indeed. The signature. I wonder if he ever thought of patenting that.
Can you?
Well, like, I don't know, like a clothing that has a little flap that you can pat yourself on the back with. You just jiggle it and it pats you on the back.
There's an extra bit of padding back here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Pat yourself on the back.
But of course, no one understands that reference outside of this podcast. So that's also.
I could imagine people having listened to our Halloween coverage and still forgetting that we gave so much coverage to the Busta Rhymes pat on the back.
Yeah. and I don't know, we'll I think we're gonna start the year as we did this year by ranking our favorite sequels from the past year. I mean, the 100 episodes is, I think, more than a year, covers more than that, but I know what won't be in there, and that's the House Party series.
Yeah, I think that in the bracketology of the this past year's movies, I don't think it's gonna make it.
It's so funny because it's
gonna go out in the first round.
Because it was your idea.
Yeah.
And I jumped on the bandwagon because I thought it's different from what we normally do.
Yeah.
We should be covering these kinds of series, and I think we both, if not instantly regretted it, then very quickly regretted it.
Lord knows for the Patreon, getting to that original and remake, that took a long time. They kept putting that off.
Yeah, we did indeed. So, it's quite a repertoire of episour episodes we've done, and films were thereof in that time. We also had a number of special episodes, but most memorably Cannonball Run 2 with Tom Taylor of Trading Places Minute.
Absolutely.
Which is a great special episode, and he has been part of our podcast, and now the Everything Sequel podcast has been part of Trading Places Minute because we have joined the Mr. Man train. My nomination of from The Godfather Part 2 made it to the Mr. Man train.
Love it.
And if you want to know what that is,
tune in.
Check out Trading Places Minute.
That's what you do, right? You tune in like a radio?
No. Yeah, that's right. You you wind the crank, generate enough kinetic energy to power up the vitriola.
Yeah, I think I had happened upon not happened upon, but I was at the beach when I was seeing an incredible sunset and took a photo, and I posted it on Instagram.
Yeah.
And friend of the show, Matt Aldrich, immediately contacted me and said, "Hey, you just threaded." And I said, "Really? I didn't mean to. I was just on Instagram. Still don't get it."
Yeah, well, I think I clicked the option to, do you want your Instagram post to go straight to Threads?
Ah.
So there's that mystery solved. Not a very interesting resolution, but easily taken care of.
Well, we got a lot of Star Wars to talk about, I'm sure, because it's us. But didn't you have a question for me from a listener?
We had a timely email from a listener, and it came in yesterday. At recording time. You'll be hearing this. It won't be yesterday when you're hearing this, but I saw it and I thought, well, I can just doorstep Mike with this on the podcast.
Okay.
Because it's really more for you than it is for me. I can only comment on one side of this question.
All right.
So I'm going to be relying on you to fill in the gaps in my knowledge. So I'm just going to read out the email and
Must be Highlander 2 related.
No, it's no, because no one would involve me if that was the case. They just this would just say hello, Mike. It wouldn't even bother saying and Tom. Well, it's from Kyriakos Vilches, who is a regular listener and emailer. Is that a thing? Emailer?
Yeah, sure.
Correspondent?
Yes,
No,
there you go.
corresponder. Yeah, so I'm just going to read the whole thing. First off, hello, Mike and Tom. Hope both of you had a wonderful Thanksgiving and spent some much needed time unwinding from what has surely been a very eventful end of the year. I'm reaching out once again to the podcast, but this time with a rather interesting character question. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I was recently engaged in a somewhat ridiculous debate with someone over the role of adults in film as moral characters, particularly fantasy franchises like Twilight and Harry Potter, and someone had the gall to tell me that Charlie Swan was more irresponsible and reckless in keeping Bella safe than Dumbledore had been with Harry. Seeing as you fellas have covered these films in past episodes and talked about each character, what do you think was the worst adult father figure for each protagonist? I feel like Charlie wasn't perfect, but comparing him to the absolute madness that is Dumbledore's arc of constantly, and even intentionally putting Harry in harm's way for some objective he could have achieved himself is such a hot take. My position is Charlie was shoehorned into a toothless role as a divorced parent where he was cut out of teenage melodrama involving his daughter and vampires and werewolves, while Dumbledore actually created and embraced magical melodrama, which complicated and endangered Harry time and time again. In almost every movie, Dumbledore acts like some cryptic wizard with dementia who forgets he's quite capable of doing a lot of what he asks Harry to do. He's apparently the greatest wizard in the world, but he'll sit back and watch Harry Potter barely survive each and every event and act like he was somehow too busy to lift a wand 90% of the time when they needed him. I don't know if there's any sort of magical equivalent of CPS in the wizarding world, but if there is, I kept thinking Dumbledore was one spell away from getting sent to Azkaban for a long time. Maybe the third movie should have been about him instead of. I'm going to say Sirius Black.
Yeah,
okay.
Sirius Black.
That's how it. That's how it seemed. That's how it read. But I question myself because I always do on Harry Potter. Anyway, what do you guys think? Am I justified here in my stance, or am I just hating on Dumbledore? Lol. Keep up the great works, fellows. There's a smiley face emoji in there that I forgot to.
You bastard.
Mr. KNV is the sign-off.
Nice.
Thoughts?
Oh, I disagree completely.
Oh, wow, excellent. So you're Team Dumbledore?
Of course I am. It's all by design. I just rewatched all those movies.
Okay.
As I often do in the November area of the calendar.
Well, they're not Christmas movies.
No, but the first ones were always released in November.
Okay.
And then once the timing, like they wanted to release a movie a year, and they realized that was obscene and ridiculous. So they started releasing them, I think, every 2 years, essentially. And
which will have no impact on what we're about to say about about Rogue One. They totally learned their lesson by then.
My initial thought is that no, Dumbledore, everything he did by design and out of necessity, because he knew what Voldemort was up to, and
he's no Palpatine.
And he knew what Harry would have to do in the end, and it was by design that he had to kind of move Harry along in small increments And you can't just tell somebody that the greatest evil wizard of all time is going to murder you when they're fucking 11. So you gotta,
Well, why not?
maybe he didn't handle everything perfectly, but I see Charlie as just like an absentee father, not paying attention at all to his fucking daughter. He's a monster.
I like the idea that that he's just doesn't it's hard to get involved in all the teenage melodrama. That's a compelling argument.
Yes.
That he's just above it and over it.
Well, if you have a teenager, they're going to be involved in teenage melodrama.
Right.
You have to be engaged and care enough about your kid to care about what they care about. It just happens that what she cares about is a fucking vampire.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to interject on this because I completely forgotten all the Harry Potter parts of this argument. So my inclination is to agree with our listener, and
You're biased.
I do remember a serious amount of gaslighting from Dumbledore in relation to Harry.
I think that's the wrong word.
Well, that in itself is gaslighting. You're gaslighting the gaslighting. No, because I mean, in my head, like anything to do with Harry Potter, I have to translate it into something I understand, which is Star Wars. And I do think Dumbledore did remind me of Palpatine in the sense that events get out of his control, and
how dare you?
Events get out of his control, and he tries to salvage that by saying it was part of some plan that he could never possibly anticipate every single stage of in the same way. So it feels like he's just making the best of a bad job sometimes. I do remember that.
Well, I don't know. If you go back and watch again, which I'm sure you won't, I would suggest that you see more of a knowing all along, not everything that's going to happen, but the general idea of what's going to happen.
Does anything change
as opposed to events out of his control?
Does anything change when he becomes a different actor? Do you get a sense that the different actors who play Dumbledore might have a different take on how much they know about what's going on?
I don't think Richard Harris got deep enough into the role for us to really answer that question. I would say he played it more.
Oh, interesting.
Probably. And he did fewer movies,
two.
Of course, but...
2 movies? Is
yeah.
That right?
Yeah,
okay.
2. So, I don't know. Yeah.
And are you thinking about the book rather than the film?
No.
Okay. This is in the film.
As far as I'm concerned, yes.
But also, I mean...
It might be hard for me to separate my book canon from the movie canon. Yeah, I don't know. But
I guess the other distinction is, like, are their situations comparable? So, Dumbledore has a duty of care to Harry to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
What is Charlie Swan's duty of care to Bella?
To his fucking daughter?
Yeah, well, yeah.
What is his duty of care? What are you talking about?
But wait a minute. So are they? I forget this too. Are they? They're just vampires. They're not blood related. I mean, they're blood related in that they're vampires, but they're not. Are they biologically related, or were they when they were alive? I can't remember.
Wait, Charlie's her father, right?
Yeah. Okay. But father in the sense of, hey, I'm the older vampire in this.
No,
group.
He's not a vampire at all. He's her cop dad.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Okay. Well,
Tom.
I know. He's got stuff. I mean, he's got stuff to do as well. He's got to be a cop.
Yeah, well, he's terrible at that job too.
He's terrible at that job. And what about as Dumbledore? He's the headmaster.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't have to teach. Does he do any teaching?
He teaches Harry in the last, well, not his last movie.
Oh, in the last movie.
Not the last movie, but in 6, he is directly teaching Harry lessons. But the lessons are all about showing him memories of Voldemort and cluing Harry into what's going on.
Charlie's got the harder job then. Because he's actually
it is his biological daughter.
No, I mean, as a cop, he's got to do stuff during the day. Dumbledore technically is just sitting around pretending that this is all part of his plan.
Whoa. He's got a very complicated world he's moving through that requires
not doing a very good
several
job of that
fronts. Oh, I disagree.
Okay, so you're Team Dumbledore. I am. I'm an undecided voter who is gonna ruin America for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay, it was great. I'm glad there's an opposite perspective.
Yeah, I'm glad I could bring some common sense to the argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, my instinct is to reject Harry Potter, but that's more to do with the franchise than
I know it is. Yeah,
than
you
necessarily
can't fool me.
Dumbledore. But I do, from my vague memories of those movies, I do remember thinking Dumbledore was a little bit of a chancer, trying to make it look like he was all-knowing.
Very good, then.
So you really think if he'd have said anything to Harry at any stage of any movie, it would have all turned out differently?
Yeah, I mean, it would be too overwhelming for a young kid. And this, I think, is more in the books than...
Okay.
At the end of one of the books, there's a big explanation as to, like, each year, why did he not tell Harry more? But essentially, he says this in the movie of 4, I believe, when he says, I care too much about you. To, like, put more on you than I should. And I think he admits that that might have been a mistake.
That's textbook gaslighting, I think. The more I tell you about this, the harder it's going to be for you. It would be easy for me to tell you, but it would be harder for you to hear. I'm bankrupt. It's that kind of... No, it's that kind of thing. It's sort of like we're in crippling debt. Anyway. Interesting.
All right.
Okay.
Let's move on. We got shit to get to here.
We do.
All right. Well, here we are. We're talking Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Yeah. It is all of those things.
Oh, hell. What year is this movie? 15?
16.
Or 16?
16.
Okay, I didn't write it down. So it's a 2016 story. And it's directed by Gareth Edwards. He's got so funny. He hasn't been doing a lot, but he did a movie called Monsters, and then he started this whole Godzilla thing by bringing Godzilla back to our lives with Bryan Cranston originally. And then just last year, I think, he did The Creator.
So, yeah.
But this is my favorite credit of his. Coming up, he'll be directing Jurassic World Rebirth.
Oh my god.
And it's coming out in 2025.
Rebirth of what?
What's that?
Rebirth of what?
That's my question, because Rebirth seems to denote
We've already done the Rebirth.
This series hasn't been around for a while, and the last one came out just like in 2022, I think.
I know, yeah, completely.
It's just the normal amount of 3 years' time for a sequel to come out. It's not a rebirth.
And that's I highly doubt that movie's going to be called that when it's finally released. I'd be very surprised if it kept that title.
Oh, I'll bet you $1 it stays Rebirth.
Okay.
All right.
I'll take that bet.
Well, this movie, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, has 84% on Rotten Tomatoes, Tom. It's pretty high.
That is remarkably high, yeah.
Now, a budget of $200 million, an opening weekend of $155 million, in the USA, $533.5 million, and in the world, $1 billion.
Mm.
People like the Rogue One. What say you, sir?
Oh, do I like it? Is that what you're asking me?
Well, you seem to have denoted in the past that you're not as thrilled with this movie as other people are, and I'm wondering what the fuck your problem is.
So there's a lot to like about Rogue One,
Agreed.
and there's a lot to dislike.
Mm.
So on one hand, you have, I would say, a handful of the best new characters we've seen in the Star Wars franchise since the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
You've also got the best consecutive minutes of a Star Wars movie since Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
On the other hand, you've got to contend with some of the worst aspects of prequel storytelling.
Okay.
And, you know, the flawed stylistic language of
Yeah.
franchise cinema in the last 10 years. So, do the successes outweigh the failures? Overall, I think so.
All right.
Also, something that struck me while I was watching it, to borrow a phrase from Samuel Beckett, as we like to do on this podcast.
Yes. Constantly.
When it comes to the failures, these failures fail better.
Okay.
So, the mistakes are made in such a way that you almost feel like they're justified going in that direction, even though even if it doesn't work.
Yeah. Can you speak to what you mean when you say the failings of prequel storytelling? Like, what are your specific? Or do you need to keep that?
No, I don't need to keep that, and we talked about it, I think, ad nauseum. But then, this is an anniversary episode, so we can do some. we can have some clips. The dramatic irony and retconning essentially are the two big ones, and I don't have a problem with retconning in general. I have a problem with it when it pretends to fit with what we've already seen.
So, are you talking specifically about the exhaust port?
Yeah, I mean everything to do with Galen Erso and the Death Star, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay.
And then in more minor ways throughout the movie, we're presented with a very different vision of what the Rebel Alliance are.
Yes, that I agree with.
What we're seeing in
anything else, yeah.
In the original Star Wars, which
Mm-hmm.
starts minutes after this movie
Right.
ends. And I think it's entirely unnecessary, I think, for this
Mhm.
movie to work, for it to try and stitch it together that way. But it's it just, none of it adds up, and it undermines so much of what we see in Star Wars.
I don't think I understand what you're saying, and broadly I agree with you in terms of the dramatic irony and the retconning. But once you decide to make this movie, and it's going to be leading up to, whatever, Leia getting the plans in that little tiny ship.
Yeah.
Like, I agree with you that you don't have to do that, but But this was the idea from the start, was like, we're going to show how they got those Death Star plans.
We'll show that. Make the movie about that. That's the only part of the movie that is completely successful.
Yeah.
Are those 45 minutes where they're stealing Death Star plans. So I don't understand why we have to have this 90 minutes beforehand, which muddies the water for that set piece. Anyway.
I don't know. I guess these things can hit you in increments, and I think most movie-going audiences think of it as a smart turn to take the one weak thing from Star Wars and then build it into your story so that it makes dramatic sense. But
what's the weak point?
Well, I think for years people were saying, why would they make this like little port where you can shoot shit into it? And then
because they analyze, they specifically say, and this is the problem, if there weren't lines speaking to this in Star Wars, you might be able to get away with it, but they say, our experts can analyze the plans and find a weakness. Not that we know there's a weakness because it was there all along, set up by this one rogue scientist within the Empire.
Yeah, but
that's different. They are two different storylines.
No, but you can. What you're just saying is that they analyzed it, but their analysis can only be done because it was built like that. And I think most people said, why would you build it like that?
But they didn't build it like that. They have people who go, okay, here's its most vulnerable point. That's so clear from Star Wars, so clear, and to mess with that clarity really annoys me.
All right,
and it doesn't actually make a dramatic difference at all. Getting the plans is a big win.
No, yeah, okay,
and that's all that matters. Anyway, so but like I say, there's a lot to like here, and throughout the movie, not just in that final 45 minutes, but that final 45 minutes gives you an impression of what this movie could have been if it had just focused on that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That one mission. Like, as I was watching this, I thought, you know what this movie should be? It should be Predator. brief preamble, then straight into the mission.
Mm.
Everything else is kind of gilding the lily, and I suspect what people feel like should be in a Star Wars movie as opposed to what should be in this particular Star Wars movie. It's like, not in that sense, it's not fully taking advantage of the liberty it has as a standalone movie that has nothing to do with the Skywalker saga.
Mm-hmm.
But like I say, like the fail better aspect of it is that when it goes down narrative roads that it doesn't need to go down, it does them better than anything you see in any of the Disney sequels subsequently.
Yeah, I mean, I can't completely disagree with you, but I don't think it rubs me as raw and wrong as it does you. Because I think in that 90 minutes that you're talking about, there's too much for me to like.
Yeah, that's great stuff.
So,
and also that it's also on a case. The interesting thing is it's on a case by case basis. Like, unlike the other Disney Star Wars sequels, I don't have this kind of blanket hatred of certain aspects of it. So, I find myself, like, for instance, the fan service in the movie. The movie is fan service heavy.
Yeah.
But, I find myself drawn to some parts of the fan service and wary of others. And it's almost on a case-by-case basis. And sometimes I surprise myself in that I kind of go into it going, you think I'd hate this, but I actually kind of like it. And then and then the reversal where I'm like, this is arguably more organic, what I'm seeing now.
But I don't like it.
But I don't like it. It shouldn't be there. So that speaks well of kind of making the best of a bad job, I think, sometimes.
Okay.
Because they're forced to have so much Star Wars IP in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think. I don't think they had a choice. I don't think the people making it had a choice. I think they were told these elements must appear at some point. And half the time, they kind of make it work, throwing that randomly throwing that IP at the screen works dramatically better sometimes than it could have done, had there been less assured filmmaking going on.
Well, remind us as we go along.
I will. So you're just a booster of this movie then. You have no reservations about it.
No, I have reservations, but I think overall, because I see just better filmmaking and better storytelling in this movie than I see in any other non-original trilogy films.
Sure. At times.
I forgive. I think I forgive maybe more than I should, but I forgive more of this movie. I think it's. I mean, even just right from the get-go, I think it takes bolder choices than a Star Wars story normally would. And I mean, we may as well just get to it. You know, you get the silver Lucasfilm, and then a long time ago.
Well,
and then we're straight into a cold open.
First one ever in Star Wars.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of I'd have to go back to those Ewok movies. But... oh, actually, you know what? I think the Star Wars holiday special is a cold open. Don't we have the cold open with Han and Chewie in the Falcon?
Is that right?
I think so. Anyway, but that's television, so you're more likely.
It's a little different, but for feature films, that's a bold choice for a Star Wars movie.
Well, it's kind of, you know, it's trying to mix the new. It's trying to be bold while also familiar at the same time. Gets in its own way a little bit with that up front. I mean, you get the Lucasfilm logo in silence and silver. So
I noted that it was silver too. Yeah.
There's no fanfare, interestingly. No. And no what I've called prequel greens. So
that's why I noted the silver, because I said there's no green.
So it's like an audiovisual break with the Skywalker saga, whether it's the prequels or the new trilogy. As you know, we've only had Force Awakens so far, but there's a definite break there. But then they throw in the tagline. But I think they're doing it for a couple of different reasons. I think partly it is to make sure that it's a branding issue, to make sure that each Star Wars movie has this at the beginning. But it's also, you know, it does key into that original late 1970s aesthetic that they are trying to reproduce here.
Yeah, right.
So it's there for nostalgia reasons as much as it is for branding reasons, I'd say.
Sure.
And yeah, the first ever cold open is a inversion of the opening shot of Star Wars, because we go up instead of down.
Right.
And we think we're seeing the underside of a ship, but it's a planet, right?
Yes. And then that's one of my notes, because I think there's, in my mind, with the rings of the planet and that sort of smoke trailing from the shuttle shot as it's passing over the rings of the planet, I think there's some pretty arresting, good-looking visuals at the top of this movie. And then when you kind of juxtapose that shuttle along the beach, I started to realize one of the things I remembered about this movie was that, you know, we've talked about this before about how every planet in Star Wars is just an all-something planet.
Oh, and yeah.
It's an all-ocean planet. It's an all-forest planet. It's an all-desert planet. And I'm not saying that this movie doesn't have that, but for some reason, something about how technology sits in the natural world just is filmed better in this movie. And yes, we're going to go to a desert planet again, but we're not going to focus on the desert of it. There's still even different ideas within that, including putting a city on top of a hilltop, on top of a mountain, that kind of thing. And So
yeah.
visually, it just all sits in a more interesting place than any other Star Wars movie since the trilogy, the original trilogy.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the idea of starting on a green planet with oceans is a good distinction, especially as we're going to a farm.
Yeah, right.
It's very important that this is not another desert farm.
Mm-hmm.
As we've seen, so we're kind of keeping some of the aesthetics of Tatooine, but we're not getting yet another surrogate Tatooine,
right?
Or at least we're not getting it in a too familiar way. And this is, I think the movie sets out its stall in these opening scenes. There's going to be a mixture of nostalgia and surprises.
Yeah.
So we're gonna make some changes, but there's going to be a general bedrock of nostalgia that you're able to read the movie through. I think I don't think I'm the first person to say this, but the detail of the fictional world that they're representing, which is that of the original Star Wars, it's so precise it kind of plays like a Star Wars period piece.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
you feel like someone, like a documentary filmmaker, is making a movie in this world, as opposed to it being a Star Wars movie.
Exactly. So my sense of it was that other Star Wars movies seem to want to expand the world in some way. There's a gambling planet, and here you're just, here you're just seeing people living on a planet and they're farming, and it just feels so much more natural and fitting into the Star Wars universe. It just feels lived in as opposed to and organic as opposed to inorganic.
And I think you often push back on my complaints about not advancing the fictional world in the sequels by the 35 years or however many years it should be. And I think this is what I'm talking about. I mean, obviously they've got an easier job because they're the period detail is kind of established already.
Right.
But it's interesting that this is what the world looks like in the sequels, but it shouldn't look like this, whereas they work very hard to make it feel like a real fictional world in a way that the sequels simply don't care about.
Well, and it's one of those problems you run into when you have a movie that starts in the 70s. You have the same thing that happens in the Alien series.
Yeah.
Where technology gets better as you go forward in time making these movies. So you have the impetus to make the world look different and make computer technology, say, look more advanced.
Yeah.
But Gareth Edwards went out of his way to say, no, I want everything to look like it did in 77, because that's the time we're in. And we're even before that time. And so, it's just having the right mindset about how to present the world.
Yeah, it's the late 70s version of what the future might look like.
Yeah.
And they stick with that throughout the movie. That said, if the television set in my kitchen started showing close-ups of Forrest Whitaker, I would return it to the manufacturer. That is, in the words of Lando Calrissian, too close. Too close to that particular man's face.
I think the ghost dog is here.
Yeah. And you can immediately see the... Also, the other thing that's kind of commonly said about this movie is if you're it's the war part of Star Wars. It's a wartime resistance movie, and I think the modeling the opening after Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds very much indicates that. And I mean, I'm confident that without knowing the exact reference, Tarantino stole it from somewhere.
Yeah, right.
But this movie is stealing it from him.
Sure.
Stealing that in iteration, because it's exactly the opening of Inglourious Basterds.
But I also still think...
coming to the farm and rumbling the fact that that he's that he is kind of hiding out
Right.
his family.
Yeah, it's the same, but I guess, it doesn't rub me the wrong way, because I think that's the best scene that probably Tarantino's ever directed, is that scene.
Oh, no, I don't
And
dislike it, but
it works in that movie, and I think it works here. One of my notes is I'm quickly invested in the future of this family and whether or not they're going to survive. And I think Mads Mikkelsen goes a long way into helping that, because he's Mads Mikkelsen. But
yeah,
and then you have Ben Mendelsohn coming down as Orson, and I think this is a pretty good turn as
Orson and not Krennic. And the name that is never said in the movie.
That's true. I don't think it's ever said, but
I like that he is Orson Krennic, though. That's a great name. But yeah. I mean, he's the first surrogate Imperial officer since Tarkin to seem genuinely fearsome and formidable.
Yeah.
The problem with that is, what that means is we don't actually need Tarkin in this movie at all.
Right.
Regardless of how you represent him.
That's one of my...
We don't actually need
we're not... Yeah, we're not there yet, but that's one of my...
We got Ben Mendelsohn.
That's one of my notes for the movie is... You're hiring actual actors to look like some of the people we're going to see.
Seems obvious when you say it like that.
Yeah, you're going to hire people that look like the people we saw in 77 on the Rebel Alliance side.
Yeah.
Why can't you do the same?
Completely.
This movie comes crashing down on itself every time you see that CGI Peter Cushing as a Governor Tarkin.
The fact that Ben Mendelsohn's Krennic works so well from minute one...
Yeah, right.
Should be an indication to you that there will not be a charisma vacuum if you don't have Tarkin in this movie.
Yeah, right.
I think that's it's like you say, what's the point of getting these really good actors to do these jobs if you're gonna, undermine
muck it up
with a cartoon head.
Yeah.
Cartoon head on a man's body.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a sort of... There's an early sign of aspects of the movie that are part of Star Wars but shouldn't necessarily be in this movie. When Jin's mother says to her, "Trust the Force," I'm like, oh. I was just like, this could be a Forceless movie. Like, this could be the first Forceless Star Wars movie. But I don't think they feel confident enough to go against the Star Wars brand enough to not have the Force play some part of it. As it goes on, they handle it really well, because I would describe this as a Force agnostic movie. Mm-hmm. If you didn't see any other Star Wars, I would leave this movie thinking, Star Wars, the Force is like religion in our world. Some people believe in it, some people don't. There's no...
Right, exactly.
You could... Any moment that involves the Force can be read. You can have the empirical version, or you can have the fantasy version.
Right.
And
because
we'll get there.
77 tells us that this religion is all but extinct.
Yeah.
And the only people talking about it are Obi-Wan talking about it with Luke. And so
it's
this
proved
does
right in that movie, though, in a way that it isn't in this movie, I think.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, this movie is presupposing the audience's knowledge of the Force as opposed to characters' knowledge of the Force, and that kind of bugs me a little bit.
Yeah,
because there's no way this mother would say trust in the Force. Like, she doesn't. Farmers don't give a shit about the Force. It's not.
I think the better choice would be to go Forceless, but I commend how they handle it later on in the movie when we have
that. I agree with. Yeah,
we have two kind of what would you call it, force clergy in the movie. One is a lapsed Force believer, the other still believes in the Force, and I think having that duality and the way it works out in the movie is the best way of handling it. But
that would be enough.
I don't think it should be part of the movie at all. So I think it's a reason why the movie is too long and bloated.
Okay.
One of the reasons, not the only reason, but...
Well, moving on. I mean, I don't know how much you want to say, but but of
Well,
course
I mean,
wife,
there's, you know,
the wife dies, and Forrest Whitaker has to get the girl.
They also, something they have in this movie is the confidence to have really good dialogue that doesn't seem like remarkable dialogue.
Yeah,
So
I noticed that too. I like when he explains that his wife has died, and then she shows up.
yeah, and she's back miraculously back from the dead.
Back from the dead, yeah.
But the best part is, you know, that they have the debate about, you know, we need to secure the galaxy, and he says, you know, but you know, this isn't peace, this is war, and Krennic just responds with, well, you have to start somewhere, and it sort of it's not like a quotable line,
Right.
but it's actually one of the best like insights into the Empire mindset that we've ever seen in Star Wars. This idea of, like, basically what the Trump administration is saying. It's sort of like, you know, all this stuff will miraculously resolve itself down the line if we become fascists now.
Yeah.
And I love the throwaway nature of it, because that's kind of how people who are in those positions think of it. They're just like, well, it's not perfect, but, you know, we've decided on fascism, so let's give it a go. And when, you know, the Jin's mother is wielding guns, and you know, they're kind of trying to make up for a lack of women in the franchise, whilst also riffing on the idea of Leia and when she grabs a gun in the original movie. The Stormtrooper toys, I think, are a step too far. Specifically that they're Stormtrooper toys. Like, why would she have toys of the villain only?
Yeah, right.
It doesn't make sense.
He did work. He was working for the Empire, so.
Oh, you think this was official merchandise, like something?
Yeah,
that
maybe
they gave her to play with when she was okay. Well, that makes more.
This is for the kids. It's like an early indoctrination thing.
Well, maybe okay. That makes more sense. But it looks like they look kind of handmade. Like,
yeah.
I would have at least wanted to see, like, toys from both sides if that was the case.
Sure.
But that's more of a throwback to Force Awakens and Rey's Star Wars toys, I think. And the idea of, you know, it's been said about The Mandalorian that it's people playing with Star Wars toys, and there's a little bit of that here too.
Yeah.
So there's a moment later on which I feel like definitely came out of someone's experience of playing with their Star Wars toys. Well, and then, so, you know, we're out of the cold open, and we get the titles, and the theme tune, which to me looks and sounds like one of those late 70s, early 80s knockoffs of Star Wars, like public domain Star Wars.
I knew you would hate it.
I know. It's just, I'll tell you what I like about it. It stresses the adventure, right? We're back to the adventure side of Star Wars. We've got so far away from that. Like, so far away.
Yeah, right.
That was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away that we felt the adventure. So I like that it does that. But, you know, it sounds like, the theme to me sounds like what you think the Ice Pirates theme tune sounds like.
I don't know. I think it has to do with the hard cut of it all, and then that adventure aspect that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it also sneaks up on me in the sense of, it's easy to forget that you're watching a cold open, and then you see the titles and you're like, holy shit, I was in a cold open this whole time. And the adventure type of music just kind of sets me off in a way where I'm like, oh, I'm ready for this fucking movie. Let's go.
Okay, yeah. I know, I get that aspect of it, but at the same time, I do think, you know, this feels like unlicensed Star Wars.
Fine. All right.
I mean, you know, the backstory to that as well is they did the music in a rush, and I think it really shows.
Mm-hmm.
The music feels like thrown together in a way that the John Williams scores don't.
Look at you sticking up for John Williams.
Well, I mean, you know, that there's a professionalism there that is a very high standard, and you can't. I mean, there was a lot of reshooting, and we don't know quite to what extent this movie was entirely done over. But occasionally you see the cracks. You know, Forrest Whitaker's hair, for instance, which...
Sure, yeah.
You know, he filmed all of his scenes bald originally, and then they went back and reshot it with the afro.
That's weird.
So you see him bald when he first pops up in that disturbing close-up in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And the next time you see him, he's got the full
He's got
afro.
the full hair. They
filmed it originally.
Like, was that a test audience thing? Like, what made them...
I think it was an internal decision, but it meant that, you know, this is the second time round for Forrest Whitaker filming all those scenes, except the one in the kitchen, because they salvaged that as, oh, well, that shows passage of time if he has a different haircut. But from that point onwards, because it's all, you know, it's all
weird.
Basically real time. So this was second time round for him. So yeah, and then we're back in prison. Well, we're not back in prison, but we're in prison.
Yeah, with our...
Which they obviously like this setting because they made it the backbone of Andor.
Uh-huh, right. But you're immediately seeing sort of that passage of time, because we're re-meeting Jyn, and she's obviously not whatever 6-year-old or however old that kid was, 6 or 7.
And she's bunking up with someone who has a bad case of tentacle sleep apnea.
Yeah.
And then something that I really don't care for, and I know partly it's to suggest the genre of a war film or an espionage film. The planet names.
Planet. Okay, I knew you. Yeah, I figured you were going to say that.
You can say I do. What do you think about it? Do you like it?
No, well, it's just one of those things that I noted we're doing something we've never really done before, and I think part of it is because we're going to so many different places in rapid succession.
Oh, but it can.
And I felt I think that's literally just what it's born out of, because.
But you can do it visually still.
Yeah, I mean, when you see a desert planet, you know it's a desert planet. The name of the desert planet, somebody will tell me through dialogue at some other point. But
well, they should have had more fun with it and had, like, not Tatooine come up with a series of names that would actually mean something to the audience.
That's
but
good.
This scene that this is pure espionage thriller scene that's coming up with. Well, we're introduced to Andor for the first time in chronology. And it's, you know, it's a secret spy meeting with various Europeans. So it feels very much like we're in a John le Carre adaptation at this point.
Yeah.
And, you know, they use the fact that this is set right before Star Wars as an excuse for the fan service to have the Stormtrooper voices that the original Stormtrooper voices, which as I understand it were like American DJ, like radio DJs, moonlighting. Including Harry Shearer.
Great.
So it's kind of like nostalgia with justification within the fictional world that that you're setting your movie in. But the moment in this it still strikes me to this day. I always forget that they go this far. He immediately kills his contact.
So this is the thing that, because there are things about. I think you referenced this earlier about what's going on with this Rebel Alliance, where I'm like, why are they making these decisions? This doesn't sound like them at all.
Yeah.
But him killing his contact, I had forgotten that happened when I rewatched it for our purposes, and I realized I found it so interesting that's how they start with. Where they start with this character, because
definitely
it immediately makes him more interesting and complicated than probably any other Star Wars character we've ever seen.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the if you're looking for a precedent, it's the morally ambiguous Star Wars hero like pre-special edition Han Solo.
Killing Guido, yeah.
killing Greedo, which is a different situation because Greedo's not on his side in the way that this guy is.
Yeah, right.
So it goes further than that, but I think they're trying to add some moral ambiguity to. I mean, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, Star Wars is kind of one of the most famous properties for seeing the world in Manichean terms of good and bad, moral and amoral.
Well, yeah,
and this movie is definitely muddying the waters on that a little bit. But they're doing it with the bedrock of his original recipe, Han Solo, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Pre-carbonite, pre-Ewok hugging Han Solo.
Sure.
You know, Han Solo when he was a bit dangerous, but dialed back even more to the point where this is kind of Han Solo before he met the rebels.
Yeah, but it's speaking to what you were saying, there's this idea because original recipe Star Wars is very much like a Western, so you got white hats and black hats.
Yeah.
And so there's never any kind of moral ambiguity in the sense that there is here.
Oh, no, yeah.
So dramatically, I think it makes more sense and is more interesting, and it kind of follows along with what's been happening in television and movies since we started this century, like with The Sopranos and, kind of
definitely
these complicated main characters and going in that direction. And so there are times where, like when this happens in this moment, I'm all for it, but there are things that'll happen later in the movie on the side of the rebels that I'm like, what are you doing? What's going on here?
I think that's where I pitch my tent as well. Is where you're. I think this in isolation is a great dramatic moment because it shows the lengths that the rebellion are willing to go to.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what it's establishing. What it leads to in the rest of the movie, this idea that there's a militant wing of the rebellion, and then there's the centrists. I think that's where you're gilding the lily and you're making something complicated that doesn't need to be complicated.
Yeah, this boss of his that's going to tell him to assassinate people when he doesn't even know what they do or do not know.
The rebellion
aspect of it
were very much presented to us as a single unified entity, and
yes, exactly, yeah.
To sort of break that down for no real good reason is a problem. But I have no problem with this idea of like, look, this is war. People have to make these moral
hard
choices
decisions
all the time, right? Yeah. Just on an individual level, that works for me. But I agree. I think it starts a bad tendency in the movie to sort of judge different parts of the rebellion different.
And the other thing is, this one moment leads to a great disagreement between Andor and Jyn later on, and then sets off a kind of a great, not Newt Rockney, but, kind of speech from Andor that, he's, where he's
like
later in the movie, he's going to say we've all done terrible things to try and, because we believe in this cause, but now we believe in you and we want to go with you. And, this moment sets that off really well, and you don't really need the other shit.
No, you could cut, I mean, it makes me think you could cut from this to that without any loss. And that's not good because we've got about 90 minutes in between. Well, I had this when I saw that scene when it said we've all done terrible things. I'm like, I want to know what terrible things all of these people have done, and also who are all these people, and why haven't we been following them throughout the movie?
Okay.
But anyway, the other thing that struck me about these scenes is that it felt a lot to me like the Paradise City scenes from Star Trek V, which most Star Wars knockoffs will do that. Will have that effect. And it's interesting that there's this prison. We go back to Jyn and a prison escape, and it's just like the differences between film and television. Like the prison escape in Andor is about 3 episodes long or something like that.
Yeah,
whereas
totally.
whereas this happens in minutes.
Yeah.
So when you talk about there's aspects of this movie that definitely could be tightened up, but let's remember that when they did this on television, it took several episodes. It took about 90 minutes of screen time to do.
Right. Well, we're getting a lot of information, kind of heavy and fast here, because we've got Riz Ahmed and he's Bodhi, and so they're looking for him, the pilot, and then we're at the Yavin 4 Rebel Alliance headquarters, just so we can see how 70s everything looks exactly like it did back then. And
yeah, well, you have this is where you get your fanfare, right? It's a deferred fanfare because we get the
you get some Jimmy Smiths
as we go.
Right.
So this is Yavin 4 as the kind of key element of mythology.
You're gonna see that guy with the gun that always follows ships leaving.
His job is no less pointless now than it was then. In the original,
but he was really sleeping.
Yeah, he doesn't.
He was really sleeping on the job when they took off in that stolen shuttle.
Yeah.
To actually go to the secret base.
Has it ever been clarified? This would have been a great opportunity to clarify what he actually does. Is he going to shoot down a ship that is like not a rebel ship, or is he just like doing is this just a speed trap? Where it's like you're a bit fast when you came in.
Yeah. To me, it almost felt like instead of calling in your code, like you do with the Empire, like they just have technology that scans it and makes sure you're on the level.
I guarantee you that whoever did that originally in Star Wars had no idea what they were doing, and no one answered their questions about what it was.
It's probably an improv.
Because even the way he's holding it so tentatively, like, I think this is what you want me to do. And I love that, like, they reenact that here. It's like, no, you need to be standing exactly like the guy's standing. Yeah. I say, but that doesn't make any sense. Doesn't matter. You still gotta do it. Yeah. And I mean, this is where we get introduced to. I mean, Andor is certainly one of the best new characters in the franchise. Mm-hmm. Jin's pretty good.
Yeah, I think so.
K2SO is, spectacular from moment one. Yeah, and as you say, when we go into the Rebel base on Yavin 4, you realize they're getting every Star Wars set design detail perfectly, to the point where they kind of hired actors who look like the original actors who played the Rebels.
Which is all you need. It's all you need if you want to include those characters.
Yeah. And then we get the what is the first appearance in chronology of Mon Mothma. But this is interesting because the character appears in Return of the Jedi.
Right.
But this actor, Genevieve O'Reilly, played Mon Mothma in a cutscene from Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, okay.
So the idea
Well, then she's got that whole story arc in Andor. So they brought her back.
So exactly. They brought her back, but essentially you're trying to bridge the gap between the prequels and the original trilogy here. But by taking an actor who was cast in a scene that no one saw, you have the deniability of, because it's really interesting. Like going even back in 2016, the prequels were persona non gratis in a way that they're not now. Like I think Gen Z has found these movies and celebrated them in a way that Star Wars as a brand is comfortable throwing in prequel material in a way it just wasn't in 2016. There's a couple of examples in this movie where there's deafening silence on anything to do with the prequels, and this is the first one where you're sort of like, well, you went as far as casting the actor who was originally cast as Mon Mothma in a scene that never happened, but you know that no one's gonna think about the prequels. Obviously, you've got Jimmy Smits in this scene as well.
Yeah, right.
But he kind of, because he did so little in those movies, he kind of got away unscathed in a way that Hayden Christensen or various people didn't, and Natalie Portman in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a sense of like this is the missing link. This is the bridge between the prequels and the trilogy, but we just can't say the word prequel while we're doing it.
It's illegal.
It feels like that's the memo, right? The memo is if you do anything from the prequels, it must be by implication only.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, what interests me, and again, this speaks to the idea of like it's a movie set in the Star Wars fictional universe rather than the Star Wars movie. Like the underlighting of the set is not something you would ever get in a Skywars saga movie. Like it's like the idea of natural lighting. The stylistic language is different from other Star Wars movies,
Right.
even though the world is the same.
Good shit.
Well, yeah, and so the story points as well. Like the Senate is still intact, right? This is the last time that.
Yeah,
was the
I
case.
liked seeing that the Senate was still intact. I liked that.
And then as soon as they say that, Space Jimmy Smits appears on screen,
Right.
and the sort of different, distant documentary style of filming kind of makes it seem like we're watching a behind the scenes making of. And I think that's kind of the tone they're going for, isn't it? Like sort of almost like an expose of what really happened.
Yeah.
The real story of the rebellion, and that speaks to.
But you're also, because one of my notes is you're already in these moments seeing, oh, there's a bit of a dark side to the rebellion.
Yeah, and it's full. It's full of schisms.
Yeah.
That we've never heard about before.
It's like the IRA.
It's very much it's like the IRA. It's also a little bit like Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we get to the sort of the strategic acts of terrorism on Scarif, I'm just like, yeah, no bones about it. In our universe, these guys would be Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It's the IRA, and notably, there's quite a few Irish actors in the. I think General Dodana is an Irish actor.
Mm.
So it even looked like the IRA as well.
That's funny.
Because they're all sort of white guys with beards and mustaches, so they've got that kind of 70s terrorist look to them. Yeah, and all my notes here are about K2SO and how hilarious he is. I mean, and also,
do you want to know the probability of her using it
this is
against you? It's high.
It's like how many
high.
times have we heard this joke in Star Wars, and it feels fresh again because of K2SO suddenly.
Yeah.
Him just stopping and going, it's high.
It's so funny. Well, then, don't we see Tarkin here at some point? Because I wrote down the CGI puppet brings everything good to a screeching halt.
Well, before we see Tarkin's coming up, but before we see him, we're introduced to a full body Sol Guerrero for the first time, and I use the term full body advisedly because he appears to be, a General Grievous before you see him in. Yeah,
he's got a fake leg. He's got the chunk, that stomping leg.
It's interesting. Like it feels like at the very least a prequel apologist had a pass of this script and put in a lot of prequel shit. And Sol Guerrero's body seems to be that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we get the reveal of the Star Destroyer, which is like an in-universe wipe. So instead of doing a wipe, they use the ship as an edit point. Yeah.
But that's one of the things that I made a note of for this movie. There are no Star Wars wipes transitions.
Yeah. Only
they just decide to go away
world.
from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the only allusion to it in the whole movie.
So that's another bold choice where...
Well...
That's another bold choice where you think to yourself, the natural choice is to always do the Star Wars wipe.
Yeah.
And to go against that grain... Even, I mean, you could make the argument that it's a later time at 2016. 2016?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, didn't write it down. But I mean, I commend this movie for taking I consider it a bold stance to do that.
Well, speaking of bold stances... Let's talk about Governor Tarkin.
Yeah.
Because my note here is I second guess myself a little bit because, you know, you immediately go into attack mode whenever I immediately go into attack mode when anything to do with digital avatars comes up. But my first note that I made was, if you're gonna do this, you should probably attack it with confidence.
Yeah.
And do they. Because there's a second where you're toying with the idea that it's just going to be, that you're never going to see his face and it's just going to be a reflection in the window.
Right.
And then then they hit us with the face.
He turns around. Yeah.
So they have a confidence in a realism and a plausibility that is simply not there.
No, yeah.
But I don't know, like, aesthetically, should you try and buy the audience with that confidence if you're gonna do it? Because is the alternative worse, where it's just like you're just gonna keep seeing this
profile and
you're just gonna see silhouette and in a reflection
from behind.
Yeah. But then that argument immediately falls away to, if you've got this Guy Henry, who was a Peter Cushing impersonator.
Yeah.
He did like a one-man show as Peter Cushing. So he's got, and I think I know people are divided on this, but I think he's got the voice down.
I do too, yeah.
Well enough. And
well enough that I remember I went to look up.
Yeah.
Was it a guy, or like did they generate an AI voice somehow?
And you know, when you see the actor, there's no reason why you couldn't make him up to look like Peter Cushing as well. So
right.
I was just like, why not just let the impersonator take the role? Or if that's too problematic for you, replace him with Ben Mendelsohn.
Yeah.
And it's another kind of part of the movie where there's more IP than you need.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've already got Vader. You don't need Vader and Tarkin.
Right.
Especially when you've got surrogate Tarkin, who is, you know, like a surrogate that is actually worthy of Tarkin.
Right.
So
not only that, you know what's occurring to me just now is, if you have Mendelsohn and he dies, you get rid of him, and
in the
perhaps.
Film? Okay.
Yeah. In the story of the film.
I don't know why I immediately went to the production killed Ben Mendelsohn book.
Yeah. Well, what if Vader thinks he's going to be the number one now, and then all of a sudden, towards the end of this film, he realizes that it's going to be Tarkin, and that's what sets him off towards, you know, maybe I'll find my lane for getting rid of this emperor and taking over with my son.
This is
like
the other
it plants
problem.
a seed.
This D plot of Tarkin wrestling control of the Death Star from Mendelsohn, as if it was as if it wasn't always presented that he was
that he was that he was the lead
that it was
guy,
his baby,
right.
yeah. Like undoing that again speaks to why can't Ben Mendelsohn just be like, I'm the technical director of the Death Star, I work under Tarkin.
I have to admit though that I feel like that is what he is in this movie. I think they present that, what you're saying in this movie. I think he has an outsized idea of what that means.
Sure, and that's fine. That works. But the idea that Tarkin is skeptical of the Death Star, and then somehow all of that skepticism dissipates once they do a previously unmentioned weapons test.
Yeah.
That for some reason no one mentions when they do what they call the first weapons test in Star Wars.
Alderaan the test planet?
So it confuses everything, and it's all unnecessary. Plus, what really they haven't got yet is the movement of the face with the body.
Right.
Because it creates a glitch in the footage that makes it look like the streaming is broken when you're watching it. And I'm like, why did you like?
Just
it's
stop.
It's not ready yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's not ready. It's distracting. It's taking you out of the movie, and it's impossible to get back in anytime this character's on screen.
No, yeah, you're so far removed from the story, every time he shows up because all you can think about is how bad he looks. And I find it remarkable that I think filmmakers are constantly overestimating how good they think it looks.
Yeah. Well,
Because it's always better than what you'd seen in, well, up to this point in the, in any 25 years prior, this is the best it probably ever looked.
Right.
And then even with, say, the Indiana Jones of it all in the last sequel they made, I remember thinking, okay, it's the best it's ever looked. It still looks terrible.
Yeah.
So they're always making these huge strides, but to what purpose? Because it never looks good enough.
You see, what they should do is, whenever they do these, they should do a test where they put on, like, the head of Snoopy or Bullwinkle. And they go, just think about it as an animated character in the real world for a second.
Right.
So, is that right to do? Is that what we should be doing?
Mm-hmm.
Are we essentially combining two separate universes here?
The answer should not surprise you.
But I just, there's not, and we talked about this ad nauseum when we talked about Dial of Destiny, but they don't think through the ramifications of what it does to the rest of the fictional world and storytelling around it.
Right. Yeah.
Because every shot has to be a cutaway to a lone officer standing there talking to Tarkin.
Right.
Like, okay, so for these scenes, there's only one way you can shoot it. That is a severe limitation to set on your storytelling for this one technological idea you're trying to experiment.
Harness. Yeah.
Yeah. And this, you take everything to do with Tarkin out of this movie anyway, and it would make no difference.
And it would be it'd be an even better movie.
Ben Mendelsohn could report all the problems he's having with Tarkin, and
yep.
It's because you think of. I mean, I know why the Emperor's not in this movie is because the prequels are still unpopular. Otherwise, they would have totally got Ian McDermott back in that makeup and do all the stuff that Tarkin does here. Totally.
And you have a guy that can do the voice. So if you're just, if he's in your movie, but you're just hearing his voice giving commands to Mendelsohn, maybe it's enough. And I'm not saying a lot, but you have that nugget that you have, like, you got one coming up with the walrus and the angry guy.
It's interesting as well because you have Tarkin saying, I don't know if it's here or a little bit later. He says, Darth Vader and the Emperor are busy, and so as an audience you go, okay, so we're not going to see them. Fine.
Yeah,
screenplay's dealt with it, and then they surprise you because you get Vader. Although I don't know how much of that is reshoots and how much that was an add-on. But that and it's like, couldn't you have done that with Tarkin as well, where it's just Krennic going, Tarkin and Vader and the Emperor are busy. They got other shit to do. They're not focused on this. They got an empire to run, you might say. While I mess around with this project that's going nowhere.
Yeah, they're working on a new old-fashioned recipe. All right, we've got a pretty good start here, and we're about to get to a major battle. Why don't we take our first break?
I dread to think how long we've been talking.
Only an hour and a half.
Oh, that's longer than I thought. Yeah, let's do it. I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops.
And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here talking about the 2016 film Rogue One, a Star Wars story, directed by Gareth Edwards. Coming to you soon, Jurassic World Rebirth.
Oh, I forgot to say, not to take us all the way back to the business at the beginning, but the Godzilla movie he did was notable for, again, like 2 acts of nothing and then the Godzilla movie. So I wonder if it's like it's just his
thing.
Style of dealing with franchises. We have 2 acts of kind of playing around in the fictional world, and then we get to the part of the movie that people actually came to see.
Nobody went and saw it, but I kind of liked the creator.
I don't know anything about that. What is that?
That's the one with, I forget his name, Denzel Washington's kid. And he's trying to get that robot kid, but it turns out the robot kid will be the death of all of us.
Oh, I did not ringing any bells. I completely missed
okay.
out on that one.
We don't have time to discuss it, Tom.
That's fair enough, yeah. Well, he gives good robots, so I'll give it a chance.
Yeah. All right, where are you? I have Jin going to, they're at what is it? Jeddah.
Jeddah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has a flashback dream, which is that classic modern movie lack of faith in the audience memory or intelligence. But I mean, the content of the flashbacks is interesting because it really compounds the analogy of the Nazi scientist. When he's dressed in the Imperial when Mads Mikkelsen appears in that uniform, you realize that this is an analogy to, the Nazi scientists who joined the other side when the war was over.
Well, I also wrote down that she's dreaming her memories, which I never do, but seems to happen a lot in movies.
People in movies dream their memories, yeah. They save their flashbacks for when they're asleep.
Yeah.
Normally, my flashbacks happen while I'm awake, so I remember them, but, well, Jeddah, I mean, after bucking the trend, they go back to another Tatooine-looking planet. So we're building up this repertoire of both overusing Tatooine and overusing surrogate Tatooine planets as well. Cause
yeah,
like, a year
this one doesn't rub me as wrong as other. Yeah, this one doesn't bother me as much.
Planet. Well, let's just get out of the desert. Why do we need to be in the desert anyway?
Overall, I agree with you, but this one is interesting looking to me. Now, you said some of the fan service that you liked, even though you shouldn't. Are you including Walrus? And,
definitely, yes.
Watch yourself.
That's my exact note. That's the exact note. So, I my exact note is: you think I'd mind Dr. Erdogan and Ponda Baba here, particularly because the timeline math simply doesn't work. That they could get off first of all, that they could get off out of the city before it gets destroyed.
Yeah.
They have to be going right to their ship at that exact point, and that they find their way to Tatooine within the next few cycles, and they're kind of established enough in the life of the cantina that everyone knows they're troublemakers.
Knows who they are.
Yeah,
they're troublemakers.
But I liked it. What I liked about it was the kind of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern dimension of it, the idea that we're following these kind of minor characters through the chronology. And speaking of the cantina, I liked the variation of, rather than, like you say, trying to come up with a something bigger and better than the cantina, like the gambling planet. What they do is it's like we just sort of see the cantina life on the streets, like in the market. And I think that was a really good choice. So much so we have the troublemakers of the cantina in there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's something to me. I like the mythology of these two go around Galaxy, starting fights wherever they go.
Picking fights wherever they go. That's what made me laugh about it.
But also, isn't it reversed as well? Like Ponda Baba's the one who pulls him away.
Yeah.
Apart from the other way around, and it's the other way around in the cantina, isn't it? And well, I guess they're a double act, aren't they? They're
true.
Because it's like he doesn't like
he's
you.
He's
I
definitely
like
saying he's definitely warning Luke about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's saying I'm worse.
Yeah.
Which is
I'm wanted in some 12 systems,
including the one Jedda's in.
Yeah.
Now
I barely escaped that planet.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, it was close. Well, you've got
if I had stopped to beat up a girl, I might be dead right now.
I don't know if I buy into the low-flying Star Destroyers at all.
Why not?
I don't know. I feel like that's in science fiction. You've got to be careful of just like changing the science all of a sudden. Like, there's no sense in which these are that these go into the atmosphere of a planet. They've always seen them above the atmosphere, so I don't know. I think
they're always sending shuttles down.
And I think the impetus is, wouldn't it be cool if we saw a Star Destroyer like right on the planet's surface?
Sure.
The binocular shot, of course, which I think there's one in every movie, right? There's a binocular shot in every Star Wars movie.
I guess I felt like I got the sense that they thought they were covering for that because the shipments kept getting attacked or exploded, and so don't they reference that at some point for the crystals? And so they brought it down closer so that it was not as far a move.
I think that's like, they doesn't seem like the ship should be able to do that. But anyway, I mean, it's happened now. There's nothing you can do about it. It's part of the lore. And I like this. I like the cityscape that they show.
Me too.
Because it sort of bridges the prequel color palettes where everything's a little bit brighter and pops a bit more. But now the technology's advanced to the point where now it feels like a real physical place as well.
Yeah.
So you get the best of both worlds, I think, with the look there.
I also think there's some good filmmaking going on here in the sense of as Jin's moving in and about the city and kind of seeing the stormtroopers and then kind of also seeing rebels. Yeah. Like Gareth Edwards is able to show, without any dialogue, he's showing you something about that character.
Yeah.
Her intelligence, what she can see. Like, she knows shit is going to go down.
Yeah.
And when you have that, it's because this is kind of still feels like the spy movie.
Yeah, definitely. This whole
that we started with, and this whole sequence very much feels like that sort of genre filmmaking, and it's done well, I think.
I really don't like the anything that's said in this movie about hope. It feels like these are the rewrites. These are the let's tie it to the branding, because it's like if it's a kind of forced conversion of IP with original Star Wars, because hardcore fans that you're trying to attract by doing an exact replica of Star Wars 77 don't call it A New Hope. They don't give a shit about hope. Yeah. So we don't need it. They don't need to be told that this is a story about hope, because hope is meaningless to them.
Sure.
But I love the one, and again, I think another one of the best new characters in the franchise for a long, long time, Space Satuichi. I don't know what his actual name is, but that's what I'm calling him, the Blind Swordsman.
He's great.
It's
Chirrut, right?
Chirrut, yeah.
Chirrut Imwe?
And you know it's authentic to the series because Star Wars is rooted in Japanese action cinema.
Mm-hmm.
So this is this while you know, idiots might sort of say, well, it's trying to be woke and you know, introduce diversity in the series. Actually, it returns to the roots of the series, both in the sense that, you know, like Asian cinema, but also the specific trope of the blind swordsman, which is you know, Zatoichi character
Right.
that one of my favorite films is a adaptation of that story. The Takeshi Kitano one. Zatoichi is amazing. And you know, there's no need to bring the Force into this film, but at least it's done in a cool way with badass warriors, not more councils.
Yeah.
This is, I think, speaking directly to what the fans want from the Force, which is it used in fights rather than theological discussions sat around in councils.
Well, there's a couple things that go on here. One is when Jin shoots that other robot.
Amazing.
And K2SO shows up. And he's like, did you know that wasn't me? That's
It's a
just
shame.
one of the best fucking jokes.
It's a shame they didn't have the confidence to go through with that just entirely visually. I mean, any K2SO line is great, right? But
Right.
you could actually do that silently. Like, he
Right.
doesn't need to say, did you think that was me? It's clear what's happening here. Just need
Yeah,
the facial
sure.
reactions between. You just need him, like, the droid falling and him being directly behind. That's all you need. There's one at the end of this scene as well with where they put the hood on Chirrut.
Yeah, it's great.
And he says, "Are
you
kidding?
kidding?
I'm blind,"
Yeah.
and it's this stupid people ADR that they added on, presumably because they didn't have confidence that people would get the joke and remember he was. Or again, no faith in the audience's memory or intelligence. Put the hood on the head, end the shot. It'll get the same laugh, and then you don't have to. You don't have to. Anyway, it should all be visual, but it's still good comedy. It's still
it is, yeah.
It's still good comedy.
But I will say, on the plus side, Edwards is able to show you what Chirrut can do and how he does it in under 5 seconds. That's some of the best visual storytelling for fighting I've seen in a long time. It's really great with the clicks of, you know, kind of about to squeeze the trigger and the foot in the sand and the grabbing the sticks and all of that was fucking great.
And the fact I mean, we'll get into this later, but the fact that he has a wingman covering him at all times means it's not necessarily the Force helping him.
True.
Because if anything goes wrong, this guy's going to blow away anyone who gets in his way. Well, I mean, there's a lot.
Did you notice there was a new reason for holograms, including watching sexy dancers?
Oh yeah.
I like that.
Something else about this scene, and I agree, like the action is really well, but it's that kind of best of both worlds editing that we were talking about in relation to Jaws, where you cut on the action, but you're moving the camera and staging the action as continuous when you can.
Right.
So you get the dynamism of action movie editing, but at the same time you get the sense of ongoing action by not cutting every few seconds when you don't need to. And that there's an image in here which speaks directly to kind of war movies or war media, which is the child in the middle of the street, which is kind of trying to recreate the photograph from the Vietnam War of the napalm girl. So there is this sense of like playing with images of war in the media,
right,
through this movie.
And then on top of it, you get to show the inner soul of your lead character. You know, we know that she's a good person.
Right. And then when they get to the martial arts, they film it in widescreen with a rolling camera, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
It looks like
so
a kind
good.
of Shaw Brothers kung fu movie. It's fucking amazing. It's the best action, definitely in the sequel era,
for sure.
But maybe in Star Wars altogether. And also, again, like, fail better. You don't to do Han Solo vamping scene again, right? That moment's gone.
Yes,
We're never
right.
gonna get it back. But this is as close as it get. K2SO's vamping in this scene is as close as we get to the sublime comedy of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's in its own right. It's when he's trying to vamp, and they say, "Where are you taking those prisoners?" And he leans into them and says, "These are prisoners." So I love that. Like Alan Tudyk is obviously like doing a version of like where you're improvising, but you're not listening.
Yes, right.
So you've already decided the line in your head, and he does this kind of like Ricky Gervais in The Office lean in, with which when you're doing kind of robot, I assume motion capture acting that's not easy stuff here.
I like his backhand too.
Oh, the impromptu slap is
So
hilarious. There's a fresh one of those in your mouth. Because you get the sense of this real desire to. Now he's got the he's in a situation where he can legitimately slap Andor in the face and get him back for all the shit he's put him through.
All the shit.
And he's gonna take full advantage of it. And I love that with Chirrut and what's the name of the guy with the gun?
Baze or
Baze.
I think it's not Baze, is
right.
it? Baze, I think. Baze Malbus.
Baze Malbus, yeah.
I also think this movie has better Star Wars names than we've had
true.
in a while. Yeah.
Orson Krennic.
Yeah.
Babes, what was he called? Baze Maltus?
Malbus.
Chirrut
Inway. Doesn't hurt that you have Donnie Yen too. I mean, he's fucking great.
Phenomenal. Well, both these actors are great, and you have this because you have sword and gun, so essentially you can do both sides of the scene from Raiders. With the guy who does the elaborate sword shit, and then the guy who shoots, but it's the same guy. It's the same team. And then they debate, like they're saying, they debate force versus free will. So it's like they're not succumbing to the wizardry of the Star Wars saga. It's interesting stuff. Anyway,
I always had the sense that Chirrut was just a good fighter, but not an actual Jedi. Is that what you had in your kind of canon?
Well, I think he says specifically, he's not. He's a disciple of the Force. He's nothing to do with the Jedis.
Yeah. Okay.
And he thinks the Force is helping him fight, but I don't know if the movie puts its puts its money down on any particular bet there. Which is what I like about how they handle the whole issue of, I think, having to have the Force in their movie in some respect.
Yeah.
Because it's too.
Do you like this bit about? I can't remember where it comes from. I can't remember who says it, but they get arrested. They get not arrested. They get taken by Forrest Whitaker's people. Mm-hmm. At some point, somebody says Alliance or Rebels, whatever you call yourselves.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that a lot in the sequel.
Whatever it is you're calling
who are these people?
Days. Yeah.
Like, I like that.
Well, it's like trying to make it seem like the confusion of what the rebels are actually called in the movies is somehow part of the fictional world history of all these different schisms over the years. It's sort of like, well, I mean, clearly not why we're confused, but it'll do as an explanation. Yeah, so we've got, I mean, the holograms, the sexy lady holograms are interesting. Also, physical holo chess, which is just chess.
Yeah.
So I don't know, this was a physical game and then they did a hologramic version of it. I don't know, but they clearly wanted to have a physical version of that holo chess thing. That's there funny. Maybe because these guys can't afford the hologram.
Maybe. So,
but I mean, just the tentacle nonsense of Bor Gullet is...
Yeah.
I mean, they already ruined a whole set piece in the last movie with tentacle nonsense, and now they're doing it all over again. And there's no residual effect of anything that Bor Gullet does.
No, yeah.
Because
he seems
Forrest
to be
Whitaker
a bit...
makes a big thing about, he will ruin your mind.
Yeah.
And then he seems to
have ruined it for a good 5 to 7 minutes.
A good fight, yeah. And then he's back to full faculty. So
yeah,
that's such a pointless distraction.
My note was that Bodhi was Bore Gullet drunk
Yeah.
for a few minutes.
Yeah, and then we get to the pre-test Death Star test.
Yes.
Which is the most egregious moment of rewriting the history of the series.
The
reason I don't like it is because it devalues that moment in Star Wars.
right.
If you think that it's the third
and they think
test.
what I think what I'm equally as offended by is that they think that they're not ruining that moment because this isn't a full planetary destruction. They're just destroying a city, and I think they think that's enough to say,
that's a
well, it's
workaround,
not a
isn't it?
full
Yeah.
test. Yeah.
They're basically saying that's why we called it a full test and made no reference to this.
Right.
It's like, that's not the reason. The reason is you made it more complicated than it needed to be.
Yeah.
So I take umbrage.
I know.
And I assume,
I know.
and I assume you take umbrage at the big hologram of Galen Erso, or is that okay? Is that where how big is a hologram? How big does a hologram?
Oh,
have to
I
be
don't
for you to
remember
hate it?
thinking it was too big.
Okay. I mean, it's like it's to scale. It's to scale, okay?
That does seem egregious.
But he's got more retconning as well. He's gonna say, this was a planned weakness. I put it in there.
Yeah.
You've never heard of me before, but this is what we're doing now. So there's lots of inorganic ads here that you don't need to retell the story. Quite frankly, it just feels like,
Maybe not.
It feels insecure of like, we've got to put our own spin on this. It's like, you actually don't. Your project is to dramatize
Getting the plans.
one sentence from the opening crawl of Star Wars. That is literally your only mission here. No one said add to that opening crawl. Lots of irrelevant information about.
I don't know. It doesn't
the
rub me
minutia.
as wrong as it does you. It's not bothering me quite as much. But in spirit, I understand your argument.
Yeah.
And can't disagree with it.
Yeah. But so we're obviously this is Escape from Jeddah. This this scene. K2SO repeats the odds joke, which is like, yeah, Keith are landing a joke. Don't do it again in diminished form.
Yeah.
So it's kind because and again it's like this all kind of feels like an add-on because it's a previously unmentioned test of the Death Star, which you think would factor into the story in Star Wars in some respect.
Level. Yeah.
And also they're grappling, kind of scrambling in a sense to have Tarkin take charge of the Death Star. And if you're scrambling so much for him to like take control, why not? Why couldn't he been in control from the first, like we thought he was before the movie started?
Right. And also,
you created this confusion. This confusion was not there in our minds.
He is Ben Mendelsohn's boss, so technically,
Yeah.
he is in charge. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems a weird thing. I guess it has more to do with character development for Ben Mendelsohn. Really, it's more just him.
Sure, for him, yeah. Something for him to bounce off, but in doing so, you spoil Tarkin, because when Tarkin says, this space station is now, what is the line he says? This is the
Now operational.
Well, he
Or
sort of says
fully
this
operational.
He turns to that conference table and says, "This is the shit." And
Yeah, right.
because of this movie, we're not supposed to believe that he actually believes that when he's saying it. But of course, Peter Cushing is playing it as if I believe this.
Mm-hmm.
But
Also, why would you not believe it?
well, because he thought it wasn't going to work, which is that's a story line you can still have.
You got the best Nazi scientists working on it.
But he left for so long.
That's true.
All of that is fine, I think. The idea that because they have to explain why it took 20 odd years to make.
Sure. Well,
because they do that they seed that at the beginning, don't they? And they say progress has slowed down since you left. And that's
Yeah.
like, okay, so that's why even though they had the plans at the end of Attack of the Clones,
Yeah.
they haven't finished it until minutes before or
I don't know. When I look at the Death Star, it seems like one of those things that would take 50 years to build anyway. Like,
but they can also rebuild
pretty
it.
fucking big.
Rebuild it in 1 or 2 years.
That's the problem. Is
Yeah.
when you, that's the real problem.
And I don't like the Galen Erso is the secret reason the Emperor fell, because that goes against the collective message of heroism from the original Star Wars. It's the idea that they all did it together.
Yeah, true.
It wasn't this. I don't like this great man version of history that this movie's trying to slip under our noses.
Mm.
Oh, and the place names are awful in general, but the worst one I think is Imperial Kyber Refinery. It's like, you can't just make up a name for a planet. It has to be expanded. It has to be like play into expanded universe shit of like the lightsabers are full of kyber crystals that you have to mine and refine. I was like, oh, come on. But this is what there's a moment here with K2SO which I think is every bit as good, if not better, than what people gush over in Guardians of the Galaxy with Drax. Where they're like saying, "Oh, this is the science fiction representation of autism," and everyone goes, "Oh, it's so amazing." But it looks this is way better when K2SO repeats something Jin says, and and does it in the same intonation. No, what she said was, "It will all go down," and he does the physicality of it. And to me, I was just like, nobody talks about this as like this is an even better representation of it, and even better because it doesn't draw attention to itself in the same way that Drax does.
I think it's where are you now? Because as far as the planet kind of not exploding, but the shockwave of it all, the city exploding. That rock slide looks pretty good.
Yeah.
So technically, I think.
Oh well, yeah. So I'm in on the dark planet, the Imperial Kyber Refinery now. Yeah.
Okay.
Which to me is one mission too many. If I had my pick, I'd lose this one, mainly because I can't see what's going on as well.
Yeah, that's true. It's
no reason this movie has to be over 2 hours.
I think this entire scene, and how long is this? 20 minutes at least?
It could be, yes. It's at least 10, I'd say.
At any rate,
it's
this
got
whole
some good
thing,
stuff in it. I mean, the content
No,
of it
yeah.
is good. But
so the problem is like
stylistically,
the whole thing is basically just to see if Andor will assassinate this guy or not.
Yeah. Well,
That's the only.
There's some side pleasures, like seeing the Empire weeding out the traitor, because we hear a lot about how the Empire oppresses people, but we don't actually see it that much. So I like that we see the sort of mechanics of, what do the Empire do to terrorize people on a on an
That's
everyday
actually a really
basis.
good moment when those other scientists, you see that they think this is the end of their lives, and Galen.
Yeah.
You wonder how far he'll take his ruse, but his humanity takes over. I like that moment where he puts himself between them.
And it makes you, it's sort of like in a sort of fictional world plausibility sense, you leave sort of thinking, yeah, with this playbook, I get the sense that the Empire could last as long as they did.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get a kind of detailed sense of that normally in the series.
Right.
And X-Wing squadron attacks. I mean, how can you not like that?
Sure.
your excitement is tempered a little by our heroes firing at the right targets for the wrong reasons. Because they're being sent into
that one shifty rebel guy is still trying to get his assassination on.
Exactly. But Space Zatoichi makes the Force cool again.
Mm-hmm.
All of his work is undone by Ray and Ren in the next couple of films. It's so interesting because with what he does, there's no Force creep.
Right.
And again, I think they're playing by the rules of what we're told about the Force in Star Wars 77, and not even like in Empire Strikes Back. It's like, nope, Star Wars 77, that's it. Anything from the Force, that's all we're allowed to use.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume Empire never happened. Let's assume it was needle in the camel's eye or whatever. The
right.
splinter of the mind's eye or whatever. That's a Brian Eno album. He makes it cool again, and the next couple of films are just like, pulling beads out of space through teleportation, and you're like, didn't need to go here. Look how cool it could be if you just stick with the rules you already have.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it at such length about the adding of it's new force power. Who does?
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
Just constantly adding shit.
None of that here. This is an example of playing within the limitations of what you've been given, and it hits a sweet spot, I think. And we get, something we see in virtually all of the Star Wars movies, which is a patriarch death in Firelight.
Yeah.
With Galen Erso. It's a stuck in trade of fathers and father figures dying in very operatic terms against a background of flames.
Sure.
And
there was something within it, though, the idea of him seeing her as a grown woman now.
Yeah.
That does make it particularly tragic, and his sacrifice all the more important and kind of noble. So even though I might in theory agree with you about his putting the weakness in.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't bother me as much as it does you, but within that you get this moment, and I like that moment. So there's always something, like you said, there's always something good within the failings as well.
Think, yes, there's something good within the failings, and what I really liked in this scene was the relationship between Cassian and Jyn.
Yeah, me too.
And even though it's not a romance, although it kind of more or less becomes that by the end of the movie, I like the banter between them. It's not banter. That's
this argument that's coming up. I like a lot. That's like,
but it's also and Andor is trying to gaslight her. Like you did to me at the beginning of this episode. And
how dare you? How dare you?
He said gaslighting the gaslighter.
No.
And it's like, it reminds me of Empire Han Solo, right? He's all that toxic male shit in the Falcon.
Right.
He's like you're paranoid. You're all that, and I love that they leave it later than they normally would for him to admit you'd admit that he's lying.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he ever actually does. I think he does. I think by
it feels like the beginning of what I told you was true from my point of view.
It does, but
and that's what I like about it, is that they're what I like is within the argument they're both kind of parsing their words.
Yeah, it's great.
And not slowing down for the audience. And it's one of those moments, one of those few moments where they're not slowing things down for the audience, and you can just literally listen to them make their argument. Because for her, it's like flat out, like, you were going to kill him, you're a liar, you're a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And his argument about well, I had the chance and I didn't do it, it's like the first time in his life probably, since he's joined the Rebel Alliance, that he decided to do something. Yeah.
Season 2.
That he's so he's decided to do something against what he was ordered to do. It was like his own idea came into being, and I like that.
I like that a lot. Yeah, it's interesting. This is where I think maybe they didn't know what his backstory was going to be until they got around to writing Andor, because what the backstory he's talking about doesn't have that Tarzan boy kind of element that his backstory has in Andor, where he's essentially Tarzan. And none of that comes through in this scene, but it's good that they kept their options open so they could so they could play around with that. And then we go back to, even though the movie refuses to tell us that this is where it is for the first time ever in the movie, we're back on Mustafar.
Mm-hmm.
Where we were last with Darth Vader and Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
No planet marker, because again, we're uneasy about returning to anything that mentions the prequels.
I know, we've been labeling everything.
So
And
interesting
suddenly-
that the one place we don't go to is a key set piece in one of the prequels.
Yeah.
How coincidental. But so we see Vader, like they sort of split the difference between Vader in his egg in Empire
Yeah.
and Luke in the fat Bacta tank in Empire. You know, which did I tell you on the episode that when I was a kid, I thought Luke, when you see Luke in the Bacta tank at the beginning of Empire, I thought that was Porkins. Who?
Oh, really?
Because they have the kind of reflection on the surface makes him look like a beast inside the tank.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought, in my kid brain, I went, Porkins survived the end.
Yeah.
And for some reason we're spending this screen time
That's
watching
funny.
him so he can be part of this movie again. Anyway.
Well, whenever I see this one, because it's all close up, but blurred,
Yeah.
and I keep wanting to pan down to see like a missing leg or something, or missing arms or hands, because they got to take all the electronic shit off to put them in there, right? So
Yeah.
but they never go that distance to show you severed limbs.
And this shows the difference between the attitude towards the prequels now and in 2016. Like, you know, we've had the Hayden Christensen redemption in Ahsoka, but no one would think of asking
No.
him back for this, to do this.
Right.
But it makes total sense that he would do this. But
Sure.
they would never dream of it in 2016, and now
Yeah, it's interesting.
and now they have they would have no problem going back to like such a divisive issue as the prequels.
I seem to recall reading a note about that, about, you know, he was willing and wanted to come back, and
Oh, sure.
it was not even on the table for him. Yeah.
And when he gets in the bucket.
Oh, likewise the tank.
Yeah.
I just blanked on the name. What is it?
Back to tank, but you don't
Bacta.
need to call it that.
So
That's expanded
part of
universe bullshit.
that was one of the things I read in the IMDb notes was that Vader desperately wanted to get off the ventilator. That was the one thing he hated more than anything, and that's why he's in the tank. It's supposed to help him get off, but he never did.
Interesting. They give him the full audio-visual fan service entrance. The smoke, the theme,
Yeah.
the voice appears to
Sure.
be coming through the door of Jabba's palace for some reason. And it's interesting. A lot's been said and written about how Vader is Vader in this movie, and I see it both ways. Like they write to what Vader originally was in Star Wars 77, which was the Emperor's buffer, right? He's the go-between.
Right.
That's very clear from the way Krenning's addressing him.
They also went to great lengths to give him the original costume that changes over the original trilogy. He's got the red eye shields.
The red eye, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the kind of cape within the bottom of the half of his body or whatever.
But I do agree with the criticisms of why is he so pun-centric in his languaging?
Mm-hmm.
He made a pun once in one of the movies,
Right.
and now he's doing it several times in a scene.
Like it's his thing.
Yeah, like it's just I know, and it's so weird. I mean, you know, a lot's been said about be careful not to choke on your aspirations, director, as he's force choking him. Which, by the way, is not how Vader force chokes people. He does it to kill them. He doesn't do it to mess with them. But yeah, I just like he's got one or two more puns before that, so I'm like, like, is he a repressed comedian? What's the idea?
It's two stormtroopers walk into a
Yeah.
bar.
he's done one too many open mics, and now he speaks partly in puns. So it's both faithful and unfaithful, I think.
Yeah.
To what Vader is.
This also felt like a moment where the screenplay was stretching a little thin, where they were.
I mean, I'm pretty sure this is a reshoot.
Yeah. It just felt like they had kind of written themselves into a corner by bringing in Mendelsohn, but also including Tarkin.
Mm-hmm.
And
oh yeah,
and this was the way to kind of keep the storyline going for Mendelsohn of, well, you're not necessarily going to be thrown out the door like you think you are.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
I know what you mean. I think that's where they should have, again, like there's an impulse to put as much IP on screen as possible, whereas if you just focused on a couple of elements of the IP, like having, instead of Vader and Tarkin, just have Vader, instead of, like you've got Dr. Erdogan and Ponda Baba. You don't need chicken walkers in the street on Jeddah as well. Like, it's like, just focus it, streamline it a little bit.
Yeah.
And you can still have the fan service, but you don't get, it doesn't clutter up your movie the way it does sometimes here, I think. And then we're back to the rebellion.
Yavin.
We're back to Yavin. There's a terrible piece of amateur hour ADR, where you can hear in the background, "What is she proposing? Let the girl speak." Which sounds like a Simpsons parody. I was waiting for, "Let's not listen."
Yeah, right.
But something I realized here for the first time, it's I don't know if they intended it to be this way, but what they suspect because they talk about, well, what if this is a trap?
Right.
And so it's like, what they think the Emperor's evil plan might be here is what he actually does in Return of the Jedi.
Right. You're right.
Like, they sort of say, what if he's just trying to lure us in and, like, pretend that there's these Death Star plans that we should get just so they trap? And that's exactly what he does in
but what I guess what I find interesting, because I don't know, there's something about this scene. This is where I don't like the Rebel Alliance. I don't like everything
Agreed.
that's happening in this scene because it's
factions within factions.
Yeah, and actually, you know what's funny is it lacks all hope. It's like you're the underdogs. You have to take the big swings when you find them. And just the idea of them saying, "I don't know, too dangerous, I think."
It's authentic to what resistant movements are actually like in our world, in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not the united front that was originally presented.
Yeah, exactly,
to us.
right.
There was never a sense that this
that's I think what bothers me is the amount of infighting within this one scene and the lack of one strong voice being in charge.
Yeah.
I don't know, it rubs me the wrong way.
I agree. It rubs me because there was never a sense that any of the actions to do with getting the Death Star plans didn't have the full support of the rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
Here is kind of the cutoff point for me. Like, if they could have resolved it in this scene when they say, "Look, we all, we're from different factions, but now let's act as one alliance."
Mm-hmm.
Star Alliance.
But also, I think they
like that. Like, but they eke it out even longer, where it's sort of like they have to literally go rogue, and then the rest of the rebellion never officially sign on, but they're like, "Well, we're not gonna let our brothers die in war."
Right.
So
I think that's the self-imposed corner they wrote themselves into, because they just wanted to get to the next scene where Cassian has this speech, and that does work. It's good. And they felt like they had to get a no to say that, but they don't. They could say, "Yes, you can go, but Cassian, you can't go. You disobeyed orders. They could do something else." And then they could still
way too many people.
Yeah, you could do whatever you want but still have her join forces with him because he's the only person she trusts.
And I Mandela effect it in my memory. Like, when I think back to this movie, I think this is the scene where they're all gonna decide on unified action, and the fact that they don't, is very disappointing every time, because I'm like,
or they could say, we're gonna do this, but not with you. We don't even trust you, lady, and they decide on their own to go.
Yeah. Oh well, this is where we find we have the Henry V style speech making.
Yeah. Right.
Which is wonderfully undercut by K2SO, I think, and exactly what this scene needed. Where he says, Cassian, I'll be there. Cassian told me I had to.
Yeah.
I love. I think is great. It's like, in the end, war is a business of conscription. It's following orders. But we find out what the title means.
Yep.
It's the improvised call sign that Riz Ahmed comes up with.
Right.
Just to have something to say.
Yep. to finally do something.
Yeah. So Rogue One is very much a title that is there just to have a title.
Yeah.
It's like Solo. It's like, Solo's explanation for why he's called Han Solo. It's like, wasn't a question. It's done better there, but with the Godfather Part 2 of it all. But this is it's kind of funny that both Star Wars stories have these moments in them where something has to be explained that no one ever questioned until now.
Sure. I know I referenced it earlier, but it's actually with Andor's speech, but it's actually Jyn's gives the kind of Newt Rockney speech, like, let's go, come on.
Well, he starts it by saying, basically without saying it out loud, it's like, yes, I was trying to kill your father. I've been doing stuff like this for quite a while. It's like a confession, really. Yeah. And then she takes it over, and then K2SO undercuts it all. Well, then we have what is like a rush scene, both in world and I suspect in the writing as well, where Mon Mothma and Organa are desperately trying to stitch the trilogies together. It's a real Indiana Phoenix scene, because they're sort of like, they're basically deciding the characters and story for Star Wars. They're sort of like, right. It'll be Leia who brings the plans, and we'll give them to Obi-Wan.
Yeah, right.
And it's kind of funny.
I know somebody on a planet I can contact.
This is already sort of a retcon, this scene, or at least kind of derives from a retcon, but they've already retconned it again in Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, between then and now, it's been retconned. Because he talks like he hasn't reached out to Obi-Wan since the Clone Wars. Since he last went into exile, when Obi-Wan would tell us they're in constant contact through little hologram compacts.
Right.
So it's just it just gets depressing when it gets retconned so much that even the retcons get retconned.
I love retcon your retcon.
I love
that's not how that's supposed to work.
All the protocol business to get in Scarif is great. I feel like it's an even better version of the scene from Return of the Jedi where they're trying to get through.
I do too. And I was gonna say, I mean, we're about to get through the shield door. Why don't we take one last break and we'll come back?
Okay. And talk about what the entire movie should have been?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right.
Let's see if we can get it done in 45 minutes. We can do this in real time.
We'll see.
Did you know that the Everything Sequel podcast has a sequel? It's our Patreon, and for a low monthly donation, you can get up to 2 exclusive, full-length, ad-free bonus episodes. $5 a month gets you an episode discussing all the original movies from the series we've covered on the podcast. And that's a lot of snakeheads. But $10 a month scores you the reboot to boot. Support Everything Sequel on Patreon and reap the benefits of amazing brand new content you quite literally can't get anywhere else. Got more money than sense? We also offer one-time payments that will get you in the driver's seat of the podcast. Maybe even the passenger seat. That metaphor doesn't work, but our show does. So join the Patreon and believe the hype. It's a sequel.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. trying to break records ourselves in talking about a Star Wars movie
I think we've done that regardless.
as we finish up with Rogue
That's a
One,
low
a
bar.
Star Wars story.
A low bar, sir. We can't help but break records by fitting it into one episode.
Mm-hmm. Well, like you said, we gotta get through that shield door, and I think...
Which I have some questions about that shield gate.
Okay. You're gonna have to continue.
Oh, okay. As long as you have absolutely no follow-up questions. Well, my question would be, and this might be the stupidest thing I've ever said on this podcast, speaking of low bars, couldn't you just go around it?
How? What do you mean? I think it takes over the whole planet, doesn't it?
Wait, isn't it just inside the circle? Isn't the shield gate just inside the circle? Couldn't you go around the circle to get to the planet?
No, I think the circle surrounds the entire planet. The gate's the only way in.
But the gate is just inside the circle. Because everything goes inside goes in the circle like a basketball hoop. That's where the transparent bubble shield that once again is a legacy of the prequels. That's where that is. The rest of the maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's.
I think you're wrong.
Oh, so
I don't think it's not like a flat. You're like a flat earther right now. You think it just.
No, so
like
the shield is around the planet, but the shield gate is the only time that you could break the shield and get through.
Yeah.
So this is like the door to the planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or gate. Okay. This is not looking good for our record.
No.
Okay. Anyway, shield
the
gate.
Easiest thing to understand you're having a problem with.
I know, yeah. Well, something that I, as someone, who grew up in a generation where these were still the norms, I love that they think as far as the late 1970s could project about future technology.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still satellite transfer, right? So we're still broadcast based.
Sure.
It is data files, but we have to transmit them. So in the sense of like basically they're like obviously they're trying to not do like internet file they're trying to work back from internet file transfer. It's like if we didn't know about the internet, how would we think this would happen?
Sure.
And they kind of get to approximate idea of what the internet is, but it involves satellites and floppy disks. So it is very much a 1970s extrapolation of what the future of technology were going to be, and I love that they stay in.
I never thought of it as floppy disks as much as I thought of it as like beta tapes, like instead of VHS.
Well, it's a floppy disk that they put in the. I mean, for
it does go into a slot. But it looks like a
R2 slot, if you will.
You know what it looks like? It looks like a what are those? What are the Super 8? That's a movie. What are the
Oh, I know what you mean, like audio cassettes.
Yeah, but those big huge ones, the working 8-track or whatever it was called.
8-track, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
But there's a little bit of the internet era in there, because you still have the idea of the data files are too big to transfer. Mm-hmm. So anyone who's tried to upload an attachment that's too big,
like getting a video that's too long, trying to text it.
Yeah, exactly.
I do like the callback of getting uniforms back to 77.
Yeah. Well, there's I mean, first of all, it's interesting. Like we're familiar with the 3 or 4 of this team, but there's about at least a dozen of them. A dirty dozen, you might say. I call them the Dirty Dadanas after General Dodana, who seem like they might have interesting backstories that we could have followed.
Don't get to know
too. When we don't get to know, they're just general bad dudes. They're basically the Dirty Dozen, aren't they? We know they're all gonna.
Yes.
they're all ex-criminals and they're all gonna die. So that's all we need to know. And we go. Scarif is a tropical planet, and I don't think we've seen a tropical planet.
That's my note is tropical island new.
I mean, it's kind of. I had to qualify this with saying, like, in the trilogy era, we've not seen a tropical planet. No climate is off limits in the prequel era. I mean, we've probably seen a tropical planet without knowing it in the prequel era. But as far as we know.
What do you think about, I've got a bad feeling about this getting interrupted with quiet?
It's one of my fail better moments. It's like, it's almost acceptable, the fact that they put it in the mouth of K2SO and then it's cut off before the end.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be there. It should never be there. But
Right.
this is, if you're going to do it, this is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
It struck me that when they get in the cable car to go through the jungle, it struck me that, oh, this is what Lucasfilm were trying to do with the effects in Crystal Skull. This is what it should have looked like.
That's funny.
But I mean, obviously, like with the climate and the kind of the geography of the planet, you instantly think Vietnam War movie.
Yeah.
Right down to the point where they start shooting machine guns out of the side of transports, and it's like, okay,
sure.
Well, we're in apocalypse now, right now. We're in apocalypse now.
But we get that sort of last third act cross-cut storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's true.
That so many of these movies are.
That's true.
Reliant upon, and I don't know if
maybe
they're famous for, but
I think so. Well, George Lucas certainly thinks so.
Sure.
Even though it was his wife who came up with the idea.
When they have that establishing shot, is it Krennic? Krennic shows up and he's up top and shit starts blowing up and you have that kind of wide shot.
Well, that's where I'm like, these guys are Hamas.
Yeah. I have the sense of like, oh, it didn't seem like they were moving that far. They got those fucking rebels got around.
Yeah, they're straight up terrorists.
Yeah.
And there's this, I think, and I think, you know, when I'm talking about the best consecutive minutes of a Star Wars movie since Return of the Jedi, I'm talking about this last 45.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, absolutely.
Minus the ending, which we'll get to, hopefully. But the lead into it is a little clunky because we get possibly two of the worst fan service moments in the movie, which is where the two stormtroopers are talking about how the T-15 is going out of circulation. Which in their mind means that the stormtroopers on the Death Star, which is days later, would be talking about the T-16. One of them has already bought a T-16, even though the last that anyone knew was the T-15 was going off the market, but now there's a T-16. It's just fan service that doesn't add up.
All right, settle down, nerd.
To have the moment, and then the mouse droid sounds and the what the. It's just like, am I in an interactive Star Wars museum experience? This feels like I'm in a theme park, right? It feels like I'm walking around in a Star Wars theme park, and I wonder whether they were already thinking about what they would do Star Wars Land at...
Man, don't go ruining my high. The last part of this movie is...
That's what I'm saying.
Some of the best shit I've ever seen in any Star Wars movie.
And then that's it. And then the rest of the movie is action movie gold, I think.
Yeah.
Apart from the ending.
I'm interested to see what you hate.
Oh, I think you know. It looks like Beowulf. That's a clue.
Oh, that ending. Oh.
Oh yeah, the ending. Yeah, the ending of
I thought you meant on this planet.
Oh no. We got a good 40 minutes of glorious stuff to come up.
No, that you're absolutely right about.
I mean, this is essentially... It's interesting. This is essentially the plot of Star Wars Begins here, because Tarkin sends Vader to investigate the theft of the plans. So, like, that beginning of that procedural narrative
Mm-hmm.
is what we come into in media res in Star Wars.
Yeah, right.
From that point onwards, this is basically a prologue to Star Wars now.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that distinction. The third act of this movie is sort of, and interestingly, in the PBS radio drama, they actually dramatize this, the theft of the Death Star plans. That's how it begins. It is like a prologue to the story. So
Okay.
you actually get. There's something so perfectly slapstick about K2SO bonking that stormtrooper on the top of the head.
It's so good.
It's like I must be a Three Stooges move.
It's a Three Stooges. Yeah, exactly. But also the timing of it.
Oh, what do you think about? Here's another potentially clunky moment before I keep saying before we get to the.
God damn it, Tom.
I'm already disproving my own point. The droid cameos.
It seems completely unnecessary, but because they're going to be a part of the story of actual story
Yeah.
of 77, that's apparently going to happen an hour real time, real time within the planet story. I guess I give it a pass.
Okay. It could have been funnier. I like the idea, which I stole from the cartoonist Joe Data, who said it's like a breather in the action. So it's kind of like a nice palate cleanser for a moment.
Yeah.
And up to this point, I think they really wanted to make it so the droids would be in every Star Wars movies. They fucked that up with Solo, but at that point, they'd been in every movie. So
Right.
I felt like they couldn't not have them
Could
in
not put them
somewhere.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me it feels less egregious just because they're going to actually start off our story in 77, and so
Yeah.
seeing them is not crazy.
Although I think it'd be kind of good if, again, I think they didn't do it because it was in the prequels, but they ended the prequels on the Tantive 4, which apparently is now just a shuttle. But even though at the end of the prequels it was a real ship, it was a ship in its own right. But it would be interesting if we just found them there again, like they hadn't gone anywhere in the whole time.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know. The idea that they're on the Rebel base, I don't know, it doesn't... They're not supposed to be familiar with what's going on. And you think they would be if they were hanging out in that hangar.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway. I love the running interference on the radios because it's kind of wartime sabotage, guerrilla tactics.
Yeah, me too.
Also, using 20th century technology as well, using like World War II, Vietnam era
Exactly.
technology.
But I also like there are, when you're a small group of of insurrectionists, you can do a lot of damage so long as you're not getting caught, seen, or killed.
Hence the latest Trump administration.
Sure.
A
But
hell of a lot of damage.
But, there are those moments when the outnumbered find themselves in trouble. And in this moment, like when those AT-AT walkers appear and they start running for their lives, I always think, it's just a great moment to me in terms of you start thinking to yourself, oh man, these guys are fucked. And that this movie is going to do something that no other Star Wars movie has ever done, which is kill everybody that you cared about.
Yeah.
And again, that's another big swing for this movie, that it does something that other Star Wars movies don't do.
Yeah, it's the bravest choice they've ever
Generally
made.
speaking, it's like you get Obi-Wan killed and then nobody. Forever.
Pretty much, yeah.
But it doesn't matter because he's going to show up as a Force ghost anyway.
Well, I know I'm not quite there yet, but that was my note there. Is it's different when they can't become Force ghosts or you can't resurrect them, like the Emperor. These guys, when they're dead, they stay dead. Just that's Irving Hucksucker. Yeah, and the again that Spielbergian dimension of having a tracking shot, then cutting away to the space battle, knowing when to keep the shot going, and when to cut. And then that was, I mean, you say that is what Star Wars is most famous for, and it was Marcia Lucas, I think, who came up with the idea for the original Star Wars to do it that way. It originally wasn't planned as a cross-cut sequence.
Mm.
It was just the way she edited it together.
Okay.
Outtake footage of Star Wars.
But you know what? What's that?
No, I was outtake footage from Star Wars is coming.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's that. And I think, well, no, you're right. Sorry. Because you did say outtake.
What was that? What do you think I was talking about?
I thought you were saying that they just took some footage from Star Wars and put it back into here and used it. But no, it is outtakes. But
yeah,
but it works to me. Like you get all those characters, but you also this is the thing that I like about this movie, because it does what Star Wars does in '77. Because all those X-Wing pilots you're meeting for the first time.
Yeah.
And you manage to care about them quickly.
Yeah. Well, especially...
And that same thing happens here, that the leader, that's that mustachioed guy that ends up buying it towards the end. It's great stuff.
Yeah, and you get that pre-Porkins chub pilot who also buys it.
Right.
So I don't know why the heavy-set gentlemen always seem to get the worst of these battles, but...
You take umbrage.
No, not necessarily. No, I like it. I just don't understand why the fat guys get it first.
Oh, I had a note here that for Rian Johnson, that this is how bombers should work. Fast planes that just drop bombs quickly and get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah. And there's a lot of TIE fighters, so I'm immediately like, okay, we're trying to up the ante from that one lone TIE fighter that we see in Star Wars. But I think I don't know. It seems to work with TIE fighters because it's genuinely thrilling to see so many, and they work this magic again in Andor when they escape from prison and you see the pilots getting into the TIE fighters. It's the same thrilling feeling. So it must be something to do with TIE fighters that makes it work. And I mean there is some story clunkiness, but it's not of they didn't plan to transmit the plans. It's just a workaround for the situation they're in, and there's no sense of that from the original movie. That this is the emergency workaround, and this is where it feels kind of more like an expose. It's like, that's what you thought the story was, but no, this is what really happened.
Sure. But one of the things I kind of remarked upon as I was watching it, that it really does feel like a war movie.
Yeah.
Whenever we're out on that beach, and the whole idea of Bodhi having to plug in, but the cord won't reach, and having to kind of go back around and all of that, all of that reads to me as great war shit. And then both the way it's filmed and the way he portrays it when that grenade comes in.
Yeah.
After he plugs in is fantastic, because I think any other movie would have Bodhi sort of close his eyes and say, well, I did my part,
Yeah.
And to have that character actually just look at it and almost not be able to register in time before it explodes. Like, am I seeing what I'm seeing? Uh-oh. And then, and it's like, it's how you lose your life in war. But he did the thing that he had to do to help the cause.
And this is where it starts to turn and feel less like the gradual ramping up of bodies, because we're about to get, because it's Riz Ahmed and then K2SO, and it's like begins to feel more like an adult war film than an adventure for children.
Yeah, very much.
Because at least you at this point you don't think everyone's gonna die, but you think at least 2/3 of the cast are gonna die, a la the Magnificent Seven.
Mm-hmm.
You think that you get the sense that most of them are gonna buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Imperial architecture seems to be designed so you can have matinee-style action sequences, because they have to climb up the...
Yeah, sure.
Well, who decided this was a good way to build it?
Right.
Yeah, and it's just, it gets into like a a roll call of deaths.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's any particular reason why we have surrogate Akbars and not actual Admiral Akbar?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because we have a ship full of Akbars, but none of them are Akbar.
Mm-hmm.
Although they're Mon Calamaris, I think is the name of the race. But
Okay.
there's like a grey one, and I'm like, sounds good.
Yeah, I like my
The
Akbar.
The inferior toy. It's like it's only 3 to 5 years before Return of the Jedi. Can't we just have real Akbar?
Sure.
We get him in Last Jedi when he dies. But there's a moment in here where not Akbar sort of says, "Bring me a Hammerhead Corvette."
Yeah,
And
right.
I didn't know that was the name of this ship, and I thought that sounds like something that George Lucas and or Steven Spielberg would see, and then they would telepathically come together.
Yeah.
So Steven Spielberg just walks into the front room. Ken Capshaw like, "You've got ejaculate all over your pants." It's like, George must have seen a Hammerhead Corvette somewhere.
I also had the idea that maybe somehow they had met Dan Aykroyd because he's such a gearhead. He's like, you know what you need is a ramming ship.
Yeah, I mean it's exact, and it goes, but it's like it's a love letter to George Lucas and his gearhead nature.
Mhm.
I think that, like, I don't know if it was called a Hammerhead Corvette before, but it definitely
Right.
speaks to his car mania.
Well, I also noticed that 'cause there's this moment, I'll just mention this briefly. There's in Star Wars 77, there's one particular old guy that the camera finds.
Yes. Oh, you mean Dodana? No, the guy with the big white beard.
I don't know, but he no, not the beard. Like
okay.
in that battle scene, like before the door
Mm.
falls down and Vader comes in. There's a guy in Star Wars 77 who we see his face and it seems on purpose.
Yeah.
And then he gets shot and you have a close up of him. And he kind of falls back.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I always thought that was Luke's dad.
Like Porkins in the Bacta tank and bits of
Yeah.
Jabba.
And then
Yeah.
in this movie, I see a guy that looks like that guy. And in my head canon, I'm like, so are they just trying to show people that look like that guy? Or I don't
Yeah,
know. The
I think
whole
so.
Luke's dad of it all made me, every time I see this movie, I think, did somebody else think that was Luke's dad? Is that why I'm seeing his face again?
It's a movie full of lookalikes and soundalikes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, everyone, to cut a long story short, everyone dies in the end. Which
Yeah, they all get
bravest
it.
narrative choice the series ever made, and will make.
Yeah,
Hasn't
totally.
They haven't learned this lesson that and
How
it's as close-
impactful it can be.
Well, you get again. It's that elegiac like ending of The Empire Strikes Back,
Mm-hmm.
right down to the ship that blows up right before it goes into hyperspace. So there's such a bitter pill to
Yeah.
swallow. Do you notice
Yeah.
that? It's like everyone the Star Destroyer comes in and one ship
Right.
doesn't make it, and I'm just like, oh god, it's just bummer after bummer.
Yep.
For these guys, isn't.
But, you know, because when you choose, I mean, obviously, we know that.
And the Death Star attacks again. That's what we didn't mention either.
True, right. And that's what I was going to say is that
test.
yes, the second
three.
of 3 initial weapons tests
Yeah.
between 2 movies. But once she gets that satellite fixed out and they kill Mendelsohn
Mm.
and they walk down to that beach, I mean, for the longest time, I thought they'll get out somehow. Somehow
Yeah, I think
those
that's what the
two
movie wants you to think.
will
yeah.
live. And I don't know, it reminds me of what was that second asteroid movie? The non-Armageddon asteroid movie.
Deep Impact.
Deep Impact, where Taya
Talk
Leone
about
just
it. Deep Impact.
where Taya Leone just stands on the beach with her dad and lets the wave wash over them. You know that. And it's a you know, I like this moment between the two characters because it's all of a sudden it's a kind of love story that was not there previously. And the idea of the two people that I don't know, felt like they had the one thing to do in their lives and they did it, and they're holding each other.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, it's exactly it's the romance of shared experience. There's no
Yeah.
they're not destined to be together, but they they have the connection through what they did.
Sure.
Let's talk briefly as we can, because this is a big moment. I mean, I would
Vader
say
going nuts?
straight up scene from a slasher movie featuring Darth Vader.
Yeah.
I mean, it's relentless. It's like slasher rules for one scene only, relentless mass slaughter. Which, when you think about it, is another kind of nostalgia point, because this is the other big pulp genre of the late 1970s, is the slasher. And here's your tribute to that in a Star Wars movie. And, you know, I have ambivalence towards this scene, but I will say, to headline it, as one of the coolest, most badass Vader scenes in any representation of the character. Unfortunately, it totally undermines his first appearance in Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Unless you do the kind of, like, unless you sort of try and do your headcanon of, oh, he must have been really tired, that's why he's so low-key in the following scenes.
So, yeah, exactly.
But it does,
and
they're
that's
not
the
the
thing,
same
is
person.
like,
they're not the same person.
They're not the same person, and that's the other thing, is it kind of... This is the beginning of what we saw so much in the sequel trilogy, with force choking and putting people up onto ceilings and throwing them around and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but in a way, but in a way that's more like horror based. So I like it.
Yeah, I think, like, yes, it's badass, and it's a lot of fun to watch, but it makes the beginning of Star Wars a little odd and weird until you take into your he's exhausted argument. But
that's why he's breathing so heavily.
But I honestly think they could have tweaked it to enhance the horror just a little bit more. If it was slowed down a little bit, if he was a little bit more methodical, you would connect him to that Vader a little bit.
You could do that, yeah. I think it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty incredible when the lights go out, and then and again, like, I would love this. You know, back to former guest of the show, Pete the Retailer's point. It's like, let's do a Star Wars movie without lightsabers. This could have been it,
right?
Unfortunately,
so close.
And it's almost justified by that shot of the lights going out and then Vader's lightsaber
and the sword lighting up.
Yeah, because that's good. Like a scene from Halloween, you know?
Yeah.
And the joy I get from the scene is partly the thrill of having having a simpler Vader back. Like Vader before we knew he was Luke and Leia's father, before we had to go through a redemption arc. I just like the idea he's just a badass.
The bad guy, yeah, exactly.
He's just the bad guy. We don't have to think about all that other baggage.
Right.
So I think that's what I respond to, but I acknowledge the criticism that I've heard and read, that it doesn't set up Vader to be Vader in Star Wars. And then we're back on the Tantive, which turns out is now a shuttle, which I think should be renamed the SS4 Shadow, because when people are on there, they speak in nothing but dramatic irony. Make sure the escape pods are functional. We might need those.
Yeah.
It's like you were saying to me last night about when you went to see Wicked, and they said there's no place like home, and the Rubes from Iowa were...
Yeah. Oh my god, it's hilarious.
This is definitely a Rubes from Iowa line.
Yeah.
And, it's so funny to me that, like, in Revenge of the Sith, when they got on the Tantive 4, it was, like, the walls were bright white, and no other aspect of the world is. And still now... It's just that ship that looks like that. No other ship looks anything like this. So it still feels like they haven't kind of bridged the historical gap in design that makes the ship like this possible. And then
One of my notes, though, was how many times the plans just barely get away.
Right.
One guy running through a door over here. Like, meanwhile,
Very
Vader's...
labored, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I really thought they were going to do it where he got the plans, but it was a fake out, and there was like a dummy version that Vader got the dummy version or something like that.
Are you generally okay with this movie ending seconds before 77 starts?
Absolutely. What
Okay.
I'm not okay with is obviously Digi-Leia.
No, it's so bad.
And I guess when they were making it, they didn't even know she was going to die. So they were willing to do this while she was alive, which is an even scarier possibility. I mean, with her
Right.
consent, I assume she's part
Sure.
of the. She was in Force Awakens, so she probably was hopefully was consulted. And it's the
Just
same.
hire an actor.
Well, it's the same. Well, don't have her in the movie. There's no reason. There's no need to see her. Aside from that one shot of her, from behind.
Yeah, that's what I would have done if you know
It's the
you know
same
she
trick
has
as
yeah you
Yeah.
know she has
It's
to
the
get the
s-
plans, so you just
Yeah.
say we have the plans, and
Give them to the princess.
yeah.
And it's the same misguided confidence of Tarkin, because you see her from behind, then a glimpse, then full frontal digital,
Then full frontal, right?
and you just go,
Like
ah!
when you hear
The
give them
eyes
to
are
the
too close
princess.
together.
Yeah, exactly. When you hear
It's like fucking
when you
Wallace
hear-
from Wallace and Gromit.
That's exactly what it looks like. Fucking fuck. Yeah, when you hear give them to the princess, all you need is that door to open, somebody to say princess,
Yeah.
and because she's hooded, just like a half turn, and you're not going to see the face anyway. It'll be
And they
the
probably filmed those moments in case the technology didn't work. Although I don't know what their definition of that
in
is.
case the technology was as bad as it actually is, and they should
Yeah.
have made a different choice. But
falls below their standards of delusion that they have about it. They probably filmed those shots so they could always leave that in.
right,
Yeah, the eeriness of the dead eyes matched with the fact that she recently died. They should have edited it out. It's like the Mary Poppins moment in Last Jedi. It's tasteless.
hmm
And I think, after 45 minutes of solid action cinema, they sold the ending of the film down the river for a tasteless special effect.
right, yeah.
So, it's a
It's
shame
terrible.
the movie. It's a shame the movie has to end on that note. But everything from the moment they arrive on Scarif until
until this
they
moment.
get on the Tantive, including, I would say, despite its flaw, it's kind of again, it's like it's retconning or the narrative problems it causes the Vader scene.
Yeah.
I put that in the 45 minutes of consecutive
I agree.
gold. All right, credit check time.
All right, credit check me.
Come on, we're close to the record. It's interesting. We kind of go from auteur filmmaking of George Lucas to nobody seemingly authoring anything individually anymore. There's so many split writing and story credits,
Mm.
and it's difficult to know who made this movie. By the way, I don't know if we'll ever find out, but there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Do you mean that like he didn't have full control?
Oh, definitely not. I mean, Tony Gilroy directed some of it and rewrote most of it. Yeah, I don't think this was definitely a cooks in the kitchen situation.
All right.
The billing is unusually sound for a Star Wars movie.
We don't get that a lot.
No, I mean, and it probably helps that there's a lack of big legacy names. However, when they do get when they do get a chance to kind of decide which legacy name is more important, they blow it because they put Jimmy Smits above James Earl Jones. Now, who is more valuable to this franchise, would you say?
Yeah, right.
There's a really thin violin sound on the sound. I mean, the music in this movie is not great, but the classical orchestral music is everywhere in Star Wars. For some reason, this feels like it comes from Earth in a way that other classical music doesn't come from. I
Oh.
can't quite explain it, but
Okay.
there's a weird crediting quirk of Governor Tarkin getting 7th billing, but as Guy Henry.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of questions to be asked about how are you not crediting Peter Cushing? I guess technically you have to credit the actor who's on screen, but
Right.
does this go back to, is Crispin Glover in Back to the Future Part 2?
Yeah,
to
right,
all
right.
intents and purposes. So Warwick Davis, I assume, unless I'm just plain prejudiced, is the giggling shoot 'em up monkey in the...
Oh, yeah.
It's gotta be him, right? They only give the character name, so I don't know, but Warwick Davis is in this movie, and there's a giggling shoot 'em up monkey, so I thought
Right,
maybe it was
right.
that. Or I'm a terrible person, or both. With special acknowledgement to Peter Cushing, OBE.
Yes, I
You
saw
can't
that.
rob someone's grave and then heap on the respects like that.
And then say, exactly, and then tell your audience that you're just nothing but. Aren't we glorious? Because we're giving him all this credits.
Yeah. Costume supervisor Graham Churchyard. They missed a trick here. He should have been the location scout with a name like that.
Yeah.
In memory of Chris Bays, ends the ILM credits. So they're literally telling us they worked the team so hard they killed one of them.
Died.
Kevin Smith on the Greens team safety staff. He really
Kevin Smith?
Well, he really came round to health and safety since his heart attack.
Yeah.
End credits by Fugitive.
Oh, that's my one note. My one credit note that I wrote down.
Question is, did this company do the end credits for Fugitive, or is the idea of the Fugitive just the gold standard?
Yeah.
Special thanks, Ryan Johnson, Lord and Miller, future victims of the Disney Lucasfilm Star Wars director's curse. Special thanks, Carrie Fisher, Peter Cushing. Let's thank all the dying and or dead people who can't give their consent otherwise. Rendered with Renderman. Is this the only option, or are we supposed to convey some kind of CinemaScope-like wonder? And then now normally, I don't know about you, but once in the streaming versions of particularly Disney Plus Star Wars movies, you get an extra few minutes where you just see the international cast of dubbed voices for a while, and I normally tune out. But I was struck by the fact that the Spanish language versions of Rogue One, Cassian Andor is dubbed by Diego Luna. He dubbed himself
Love
in the
that.
Spanish language versions.
I think I remember reading that at some point.
Yeah, and I looked it up to make sure it wasn't a mistake.
Yeah.
And he's content to take work away from his diaspora.
I could get paid twice for this thing. Let's go.
Someone in Latin America doesn't have a job because of you, Diego Luna.
Is that it?
Yep, that's the end.
All right. Look at us. Record time.
Speeding through at
3 hours flat.
Okay. Well, that is a record. I mean, it's a sad
With like
record.
a half hour of business.
Yeah, that's true. So we did 2.5. So that is quite impressive for us, for Star Wars.
Yeah.
Not to say any of this is impressive in any real world sense.
Okay. Officially, is this movie good?
Yeah, it's a good movie.
All right. Thank you.
Like I say, the successes outweigh the failures, and the failures don't fail as badly as they do in other Star Wars movies of this era.
Good. Where's it fall?
Oh God, what are my hateful rankings of this series? So original. So I got Empire,
Yeah.
Star Wars.
Jedi.
Well, actually, we've only ranked the sequels, but let's face it, it's going to be Empire, Star Wars. Empire, Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, Attack of the Clones. Oh no, sorry, Solo. Attack
I
of
was
the
gonna
Clones.
say Clones over Solo.
So Solo, Attack of the Clones, Phantom Menace,
How dare you?
Revenge of the Sith.
What a monstrous apologist you are.
And then the sequels.
Okay.
So it's the same order for each trilogy.
I've got this after original trilogy.
Before Solo and before
Above
what's your next one?
Solo.
What's your next one after original trilogy? Is it Force Awakens?
No, this. Rogue One.
I know, but before you put Rogue One in there.
Oh. Yeah, I think I went Force Awakens and then Solo.
This is I forgot we had to do this, and I apologize in advance. I'm gonna put this below the Phantom Menace.
All right.
So Phantom. Yeah, Solo's a better all-round movie, although it doesn't have anything like the 45 minutes at the end of this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still gonna go. So it's between for me. It's between Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith.
All right. That's all the business we have, right? We don't need it.
Is that
We
right?
both say it's good. We're ranking. Yeah, we're good.
And so it's your favorite non-original trilogy Star Wars movie,
Yeah.
and it is somewhere in the middle of the prequels for me.
God damn it. That is just... You're such a bizarro person.
I'm trying to think. Did I end up saying? Did I end up saying Last Jedi was a good movie? I didn't, did I?
No, you didn't.
No, I didn't. So it would be.
You blanketed that shit.
It would be behind Revenge. It could still be below Revenge of the Sith. Okay, yeah, that's where it goes, I guess.
Fine. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, now you know what we think of Rogue One and whether it's a good or bad movie and where it lies within the canon. And all we need to know is what you think. Where does this lie in the canon for you? So find us on Facebook, find us on Instagram, never find us on X, but start a thread. I did.
Without even knowing it.
Yeah, I didn't even realize. Or you can send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. That's it for this episode and the year.
And our 200 to 300 episodes.
Yeah. So on to a new year and a new 100 episodes.
A new century of episodes.
Woo. What will happen in the next 100 movies? We don't even know. All right, for Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. We don't know what you'll be hearing, but you will be hearing from us again. Oh, we do know the first one. We'll chat about.
Yeah, we're going to be
ranking
the year's episodes. After that,
who knows? Say goodbye to everybody, Tom.
Congratulations, you are being rescued. Please do not resist.
Yeah, that's good.
He's like a British public service announcement.
It's high.
In droid form.
High.